I have yet to hear about any decisive victories that makes to shake the consumer confidence, America as a global reserve currency, 10-year yields, or any of these things that we kind of shook a little bit makes it worth it. It'd be one thing
sure,
if
you can say
definitely
you can say that the average person you talk to thinks that things are bad or that Trump is crazy or whatever, but like, who cares? The average person, as you and I both well know,
then what big victories have we achieved through this for our economy?
Through this specifically, I think it's going to be long-term gain.
How have you been?
I've been good. How have you been?
You know, I still keeping on with all the news and stuff, with all the updates, and you know, my house burnt down, which was a bummer.
No way.
Definitely. Yeah, my house burnt down a few months ago.
Right?
No, I died, but I mean, besides that, I'm fine. Yeah, no, you know, it happens.
I'm sorry to hear that, man.
The house is burned down, you know. I'm sure you were behind it, and the rest of the conservative deep state was, they added in for me.
How'd you know?
I
collaborated with the Mossad.
I could see it in your eye. You know what? That would make sense. Ben Gavir personally came to my house with a blowtorch to shut me up because we knew we were going to talk.
There was a tunnel.
And he wanted to change my opinion in advance, which is now why I'm in favor of Trump Heights.
Exactly.
Okay, so I wanted to bring you on today's stream because we were together on the night of the election, and I've already had one of the people who were on the night of the election, Admiral Gibbs, and I wanted to go through as many of the conservatives I could to see how we felt because we were watching it as it was happening. So we all got to talk about what we expected for the next 100 days. I talked about a lot of my concerns. You talked a lot about your hopes. You talked about the things you would like to see the presidency stay away from and the stuff you would like to see them strive towards. So I thought us specifically checking in would be more useful than a lot of other people because we were together in that moment, and nobody can take that away from us, Cam. Nobody can take that special moment away from the both of us. Where I was sitting in my chair, clutching it, feared with dread. I could hear like Beethoven's symphony behind me as I was processing, the next 4 years, triggered and in fact libbing out, and you were, of course, enjoying those liberal tears. So now that the time has passed and you have sufficiently enjoyed election night, he's been inaugurated, you got that euphoria over, and the high is worn off of election night. How do you feel 100 days in?
I feel pretty good. Yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with a lot of the. I think that there generally isn't, as many outcomes as you'd hope in the first 100 days, but I think that the outcomes that are possible within the 100 days and the outcomes we've seen, I'm pretty happy with.
Okay, so I think I don't know where we should start with. Let's start with appointments because that's pretty early on. I remember on election night we were talking a lot about, and I was talking a lot about the concerns I had with the people who would be appointed in the immediate vicinity of the president. That I thought a lot of people were telling me when I was talking about the president's shortcomings or my perceived shortcomings, that the people appointed around the president would be capable individuals who he could lean on because he's going to his second term now. He understands what he's doing. He's going to be prepared this time. And that he's going to be able to lean on the knowledge of those around him in a way where the first term he chose a bunch of people he couldn't trust, but this time he's going to trust the people around him. So he's going to lean on them. And my concern was he was going to pick people, and I can remember the exact names I said. I said I was afraid he was going to pick people like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK to be in top field positions, and people told me that they would almost certainly not get a position that night. I don't remember if you were one of those people who did not believe that night that Tulsi Gabbard would become the top intelligence official in the country or RFK would become the top health official in the country. But those are things that concerned me. And so how do you feel about the people we ended up choosing for the top cabinet positions?
I feel really good about it. I actually think that Tulsi Gabbard and RFK are like very interesting examples because I've heard from you and other people this whole time, like Trump is only going to pick people, maybe you didn't say to this extent, but like only people he can trust, right? He's only going to pick people who will never defy him or have a different opinion than him.
What we say, loyalty, right?
Well, sure. But like Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat her entire life. RFK was a Democrat and is an independent. He doesn't agree with Trump on the fundamentals like Diet Coke. RFK wants to ban Diet Coke. Trump has a button for Diet Coke on his desk. These are people who like fundamentally disagree with him on a lot of issues, but he has them in his cabinet regardless of the fact that they might disagree in some spaces. So I think that they're very interesting picks. I think I know there are a lot of concerns around RFK. I think that Tulsi Gabbard is an incredibly competent pick. I think that she's probably one of the best and most qualified people that he chose
to hold
for
that position. Do you think the best and most qualified to hold that position?
I think that Trump, she is one of the best and most qualified picks.
If she was, if Trump was looking at all of the best people to hold a position, which is what the president should do, you're the president of the United States, you should choose from the best of the best, right? You know, he said no more, or we're going to do this woke nonsense where we pick subpar people due to some like quota. We're going to go for American excellence. And do you think that Tulsi Gabbard, out of all the intelligence people that could hold that position, or all the intelligence experts, is the best person for the job?
It's certainly perceivable that there are people who are more qualified than Tulsi Gabbard, right? But there's always going to be somebody who's like a tier above, right? That doesn't take into account the fact of like maybe somebody who's more qualified didn't want the job, or they didn't want to work under Trump, or they're a Democrat, or
rung of the ladder too.
I don't think Tulsi's the bottom rung of the ladder. She's spent her entire career in the military and intelligence, specifically in the military. She's served on intelligence committees within Congress. She has an incredible qualification for this position.
Okay, so if we're saying
you're never going to have somebody who was the DNI, right? Like the DNI is the top of the ladder, right? So you're never going to have somebody who was above DNI. But you can have
somebody who worked in a high level position for an intelligence agency, or somebody who managed other human beings at an intelligence agency. Because I'll agree that through Tulsi Gabbard's multiple positions in the armed forces, she has had to decide, look at intelligence. She's had to handle classified intelligence before. The exact value of that classified intelligence, or like how classified it was, could be disputed. But there's a difference between having to handle classified intelligence, or having been experienced with classified material, and having to be the top intelligence official in the entire country, managing all of the intel that's coming in, and having to determine for the president of the United States what is good intel and what is bad intel. And when I'm hearing that she's the person, of course, who has the responsibility of briefing the president, and then the president comes out with reports like the Ukrainians have been encircled in Kursk, and then he says it multiple times, even though we know from Reuters reports that he has been briefed on the matter, which he should be, because any competent administration would. And this makes me concerned, because it would be one thing if, immediately I started to see some impact, and Tulsi Gabbard's experience started to make Trump kind of correct course from some of the nonsense he says in public. But I haven't seen that impact. We've had some high-profile intelligence scandals, but I haven't seen the impact of Tulsi Gabbard using her, let's just say, on-the-ground grassroots experience in the military to improve, the president's knowledge of intelligence, which is her main responsibility.
I don't think no matter who you could have the most qualified person on the planet, and that doesn't mean that person's going to be able to change Donald Trump's opinion of what he's going to say. Trump is going to say whatever he wants to say, regardless of, somebody says this or whatever. If he believes something to be true, he's generally going to take into account what his advisors are saying. But if he truly believes something to be true, he's going to say it regardless of, Tulsi Gabbard's not going to be able to sway his opinion. Nobody could in that position. But Tulsi Gabbard served in military intelligence. As far as personnel management goes, she was lieutenant colonel in the United States military, which means that there was a lot of people under her command. I don't know how many, but it's a rather high position. She served in the military dually while serving in Congress. She had access. So I don't know. I think she's a great pick.
Okay, so what is the job of Tulsi Gabbard in her current role? Like, what's her job?
She is the highest ranking intelligence officer in the United States.
And so she's the one who does what?
In charge of managing. She's in charge of managing classified information and managing the people who classify and declassify information. I mean, DNI has a lot of roles, but
would you say in a role like that having good judgment when it comes to classifying intelligence as legitimate or non-legitimate would be useful?
What do you mean by that?
So
good judgment on whether or not to classify a piece of information.
Let's say I'm on Twitter, right, and I'm scrolling, and I see a video, and I'm like, oh my God, it looks like the Houthis have this new mech machine, and it turns out to be like an AI-generated deepfake. We would say that would show like poor judgment of some sort that would maybe disqualify somebody from being able to, look at information, decipher it, and say, President, this is useful, go look at this. So we don't have him, the top intelligence official sending him, say, propaganda or AI nonsense or whatever it could be, you know, disinformation. They have to be the
I'm going to guess maybe there was an incident where this happened.
No,
are you going to say that there was an incident where Tulsi?
There's not. This is I'm literally I'm throwing out a scenario where.
Sure.
Okay. So we can go through the scenarios. I wasn't going to go through an AI. I was just using the AI as an example. But the examples I would think of was when she said that Ukraine's biological research facilities was a legitimate security interest for the Russians, and that when they invaded, that was one of their motivations. And these are the types of things that the United States needs to pay attention to in the future if we're going to, you know, try to stop other wars like this and not provoke them. So this is directly feeding into Russian propaganda, but it's also just like complete nonsense. These are not like weapons research facilities. These are biological research facilities that every country, Canada has them. Are we going to have Donald Trump coming out and saying that, you know, because they're researching like diseases in frogs somewhere in Quebec, we need to like airstrike some like,
let me ask you this.
This is her judgment.
Do you think
this
that
is her
because
only job
do you think that because
is
of
to
the
be good judgment, and she's bad judgment?
Sure, I get you could have the opinion that she makes bad judgment. Do you
Would you
think
say that was a good call
Tulsi
or a
Gabbard
bad
is a
call
Russian
on
accent?
her side?
I can't say. I don't know. You're way more well versed on the Ukraine
research facilities
stuff.
in Ukraine were like a real threat of any? Like,
Well, I don't know what was happening at the research facilities. I don't know, like, and I can't comment on it because I don't know anything about it. So, like, I've read the tweets, I've seen the tweets, I know exactly what tweet you're talking about. It's the same tweet that everybody uses to claim that she's a Russian asset. Do you think that?
Do I think she's a Russian asset?
No, I mean, I was busy.
Well, I think that she's a useful idiot, at least.
Come on.
Well, no, I
Okay,
mean
fair
that.
enough.
I do mean
Okay.
that.
That's a step up, at least.
I'm being genuine with you because I could. There's somewhere in me where I'm genuinely, and I'm being genuine with you. I'm genuinely a little scared because of how consistently she parrots talking points. And if you look at Russian state TV, the way they present her is as if she's Superwoman. They will play rock music over her workout videos, and they will show her as if she is the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas, the future of American, military. Oh, 1 second, my headphones disconnected. Let me just reconnect them quick. But my point about Tulsi Gabbard and the Russians is they have said, I remember Russia Today specifically said that she was their gal. And when she's constantly talking like she's working on their network, I'm not that surprised that that's how she treats her.
I mean, but you could just say the same thing about me in Israel, right? You could just say, look at the way Cam has his talking points. Look at the way Cam speaks. It's exactly how Israeli officials speak. He's obviously working for the Mossad.
Has
like,
Israel
I don't know.
ever
And then you could look
tweeted
at
out,
like an event.
Has Israel ever tweeted out, Cam Higbee is our guy? Is that something that the Israeli government or an Israeli government institution has ever tweeted out about Cam Higbee?
They've never. No, but I've went and like had dinner at the consulate and stuff and been like.
Do you not think that's at all concerning that the Russians are so confident and so trusting in the top intelligence
of course, if they feel that, wait, I think I'm losing you.
Sorry, I don't know what's up with the.
Your voice is like lagging a little bit.
Okay, we'll just. I don't know what's up with the connection. I think Putin doesn't want us to have this conversation.
It just goes like in and out.
Okay, I can see you now. I got you.
Yeah, probably. No, I think I don't. Well, I can't speak to the actions of the Russians or RT or anybody else like that, right? But like, you know, if they feel she's saying something that like furthers their propaganda, of course they're going to cling on to her as like a token American who agrees with like this or that they said, right? I think pretty much any organization that's trying to push propaganda would do this.
Okay, would you say that that Tulsi Gabbard has parroted enough of these talking, and I don't even want to get back to Assad. We can get back to the stuff where she even said before the Senate committee that, you know, she believes certain things from certain like students. What a ridiculous thing to say. This student said this thing. I just believe it was not. She looked like a fool, and I'm trying to judge that her only job really is to have the judgment to tell the president of the United States what is true and what's not true. Which, you know, considering the president's record, I think the Republican Party should probably take pretty seriously when it comes to him, you know,
Sure.
respouting mistruths. Definitely when it comes to national security. And she has just gotten it wrong so many times that I find it very hard to believe that you could not find a janitor working at an intelligence agency that could probably do a better job than her. And I don't really see any skill she brings to the table that makes her particularly
Sure.
noteworthy or exceptional that she needs to have this position when she is parroting Russian state talking points on the daily.
Well, Dylan, I can't speak to whether or not she's telling the truth or not telling the truth about the Ukraine stuff, because again, you know way more about the Ukraine stuff
you can
than
just
I
Google
do.
it. It's
you know,
really easy.
It's you and I both know that when we're talking about like very nitty gritty nuanced
we can talk
details
about her
like this, it's
position
not
on
just a matter
Syria,
of googling
though.
it.
Like her different things on
Syria?
Assad, on her reposting of, you know, Assad.
What has she said about Assad?
Well, when she talked about
What has she said about Assad?
when she talked about the Assad regime, she said that we could talk either about our lives, but we're talking about a judgment here. She said that the Assad regime, we should be working with the Russians to bomb who the Assad regime is fighting with, the groups, the rebel groups, and that we should stop condemning Russian airstrikes of Syria because they're bombing terrorists. This is the same period where the Russians were bombing hospitals, like 3-4 hospitals within 72-hour time periods, and she was saying that we should not condemn it.
Yeah, I would fundamentally disagree with that if she said that. I haven't seen it, but if she said that, then I totally disagree with that. I don't think we should be working with the Russians on anything. The Russians were working with the Assad regime. They took over our old military base in Syria. I guess maybe the sentiment to take out HTS probably comes from a thought that these people are al-Qaeda splinters and they could potentially be worse than the Assad regime. I don't know if that's going to end up being true. I mean, they are like massacring Christians and killing their own civilians, but whatever. I don't know. Personally, I think that Syria being destabilized is a good thing. So,
You think Syria being destabilized is a good thing?
hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't that
If there's not a dictatorship being propped up by Iran that allows Hezbollah to murder innocent civilians in northern Israel, I think that's probably a good thing.
Well, I don't think Syria being I think Syria starting wars with its neighbors would be a bad thing, but I don't think that Syria being destabilized is a good thing. It kills a lot of people. You know, people starve.
I think it weakens Iranian power for sure, which I think is a good thing.
Well, you could also just have an ally or not even an ally in Syria, just a power in Syria that would not be so favorable towards Iran.
But the only option that we could have had that would have been less favorable towards Iran, or that would have gotten us anywhere, had an ally in Syria, would have been like the Free Syrian Army. But they're the weakest link. It's them, the moral actors, versus the terrible al-Qaeda terrorists or the murderous.
Well, we'll probably get into this later
Assad
because
regime.
we can talk about like the strikes on the in the Syrian government later. I think it was kind of sliding into that, but I'll just this last thing about Tulsi Gabbard. Look, I don't expect to convince you right now that Tulsi Gabbard's a bad
I'll
pick.
look into it.
You can go look in the biological thing she said. You can look at how much. I beg you to go look at Russian state TV. There's a bunch of different programs that translate this. I know Julia Davis. She does a lot of translations for this as well. Just listen to the type of stuff they say about Tulsi Gabbard, and because a lot of times they'll take the worst of what she said, and they'll be the cheerleaders of the worst of what she said, and that's how I find out about it. Is because
Don't you think it's kind of like when a conservative finds a black guy who agrees with him? Don't you think it's kind of like that? Where the Russians are like,
sorry,
we found an American who agrees with us on this point.
There. I mean, yeah, but okay.
Like, don't you think it's kind of like that though? Like, don't you? Or like a liberal when they find a redneck who agrees with them, or a veteran.
I understand, but like this would, to me, right? To me, this would be like the Germans have just found their Lord Haw Haw, or the Japanese have just found their Rose of Tokyo, which was like their American version of this, right? Where they just got somebody who is doing their propaganda for them, and we've decided to make that person a top intelligence official in the country.
Well, it's
right?
it's not doing propaganda for them, right? It's like they are like somewhat aligned on this one thing, and so they use that person as a token, and they just kind of like replay it. It's like when a conservative
major security crises of our era.
I don't. Okay, I don't think the labs are like the biggest risk as far as like
The war in
Russia or
Ukraine
Ukraine propaganda, right?
is one of the largest
The war in Ukraine, yes,
Right,
I agree with
right.
I agree with you on that. But again, I think it's going to boil down to be the same thing. Like a conservative when he finds a black guy agrees with them, or a liberal when he finds a redneck or veteran that agrees with him, et cetera, et cetera. Right? It's just like tokenization, I think, probably.
Well, I'm sure that's why that's part of the reason why they talk about it so much. And I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they literally own her, but the fact that they have so much material to work with is a concern to me. And again, if she was if she had somehow
Liberal when he
improved
finds a
her
redneck or
position,
veteran that agrees.
live clipping or something.
Sorry, no, I'm just watching chat.
You're exporting to TikTok already. You really are in the 21st century.
Yeah. Lib owned. Lib owned.
Truly owned live.
Destroyed.
Every time I see her speak, I'm worried what's going to come out of her mouth, and that is the worst trait I feel I could imagine in somebody whose job isn't to interpret intelligence. And so, if she doesn't have any special skills, if she has this record of may have bad judgment calls, and many of her adversaries seem to see her as their friend, whether it was the regime of Bashar al-Assad or it is the regime of Vladimir Putin. It really throws me off that this is the person that we picked for this job. If we made her an ambassador to something, then at least I could sleep at night a little bit, feeling like, okay, well, she only has this one little, but she's the top intelligence official in the country. We don't roll the dice on something like this. Just pick some boring suit that loves Trump. It's not that hard. There's a lot of them that will at least tolerate the man if that means that they can actually advise the country to be a little bit better. You don't need to pick the pretty woman. You can pick Trump can pick the boring suit. And
what are you trying to say, Dylan?
I'm trying to say that she's not qualified, and that I think that just like you said that the Russians like tokenization, the Republicans love tokenization as well, and I think that
and so do the liberals,
sure.
orange hunting hats during election season.
I'm sure it has nothing to do.
Many
with
of the people on Hippy Dippy guilty.
I'm sure that Donald Trump looked at every nominee purely based off their merits, and that's why Kash Patel is ATF director, and that's why he's also okay. Marco Rubio, you might think he's fantastic. I don't think he's Henry Kissinger, who also thinks that it was a bad idea to have somebody be national security advisor and secretary of state at the same time. And that was 50 years ago, way before the national security advisor was such a massive position. That's another pick that's just throwing me off. Like, why would you make Mike Johnson sacrifice Waltz in the House and have that seat race? We have to invest all that money to defend that race in Florida, just to dump him 100 days later at the UN, and then do this the clusterfuck, excuse my French, with Marco Rubio. What's going on here, man?
I don't know. What is let's hear your issue with it. What's your issue with Marco Rubio?
My issue isn't even with Marco Rubio. Out of everybody around Donald Trump, Marco Rubio might actually be one of the few people who knows what he's doing. Which is actually why I haven't really complained about him in comparison to everybody else in a lot of my commentary. But I also don't think that he's Superman. I think that he's a human being. And these are two jobs that need to be held by two different people because they're just too large of responsibility. The best you can hope for, and I'm saying this like genuinely as an American who just wants my country to be okay, is that Marco Rubio uses his position at the State Department as chief diplomat, which is a totally separate role than national security advisor, where you're taking in all this intelligence, analyzing it, you're making different advices to the president. You want two different people in this position, not only to give the president two different perspectives, but also because they're so monumental. And so my hope is that he makes his deputy under him take up the national security advisor role, basically, and then they'll spread it, but then he'll maybe have to have his own separate office. I think this is not good. And he said 6 months minimum.
I think I probably agree with you that it's probably too much work for Marco Rubio. As far as like Kash Patel being in charge of the FBI and the ATF at the same time, I actually hope that one of them gets neglected over the other one. I hope he focuses on the FBI and forgets about the ATF, because as far as I'm concerned, the ATF shouldn't exist in the first place.
Well, the thing is, it's traditional to, like, if you don't believe in an institution, you appoint somebody who doesn't believe the institution either, so they don't really do their job. That's at least the idea. That's like
Wait, sorry, what? Oh yeah, like appoint somebody who doesn't care about it.
Yeah, I don't care about it, and then they'll just kind of like fall asleep at the wheel, and then you'll hope. But
thank God, I hope so.
And if that's the case at the ATF, then maybe the ATF units will just be able to do their job without, you know, Kash Patel like looking over their shoulder, which, you know, even if you don't like the ATF,
I hope he just says you're not allowed to do anything.
But here's the problem, though. As long as these institutions exist and they have certain powers, certain like legal disputes is automatically going to be handed over to them. And so even if you don't like some of the things the ATF does, if we're talking about a bust up of a large like gun running cartel deal, the ATF could inevitably get involved in that, and you want them to do a good job. And so even if you don't agree with some parts or the ATF, having, again, overburdening somebody who doesn't know anything about this institution seems like prioritizing loyalty over experience, which goes against the whole philosophy of Trump's meritocratic model that he pitched.
I don't think so. I don't think that Trump has chosen loyalty over merit at all. Like I keep hearing this from you and other people on the liberal side, and it's like he appointed a former Democrat. He appointed another former Democrat who's now an independent. He appointed somebody who openly said that Trump is Hitler, like somebody as his vice president.
I hate to tell you this, but somebody being a Democrat does not automatically make them smarter than you, Cam. Even if it's true.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait, what do you mean smarter than you? I'm not saying. I'm just saying he's appointed people who in the past have not aligned with him, and on a lot of things still don't align with him.
Well, yeah, I don't. The thing is, I don't think Trump is a man who cares necessarily about like, do you have the same interpretation of the Bible as me, Mike Pence? Do you care? Right. Do you have the same interpretation of like? This is a guy who, and I'm just trying to be blunt with you because you know I'm living out. Okay, this is a guy who cheated on his wife with a porn star while she was pregnant with his son. Yet he carried the evangelical movement. There's people who've worked with Trump who've also felt personally. He took more evangelical votes than George Herbert Walker Bush. He had good. I'm not bashing Trump for this. I'm saying that he has a lot of sway with evangelicals. That he's been able to communicate with them in a way that, despite his personal failings, that if Obama did it, they'd be calling him a baby daddy, like if there was a different situation. I
agree with you.
But because they say, you know, a flawed man can represent God, etc., they've accepted these things about Trump. And so I don't think that Trump is going to go out there and say, because J.D. Vance does not agree with me on our policy towards Israel or policy towards whatever it could be, you can't be with me, because he ultimately knows that J.D. Vance went out there and said, I will overturn the election where you lost for you if I was in that position. And that loyalty test he passed, which is also the same loyalty test that was at the FBI and other intelligence agencies, is that they had to have a certain answer when it comes to what happened around January 6th to get top jobs.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that
you acknowledge the reports of that.
Yes. Listen, Dylan, just listen to me. Okay. I want to go back to the point I was making before you lived out.
I'm happy as a liberal, please. Just tell me, does that concern you? It doesn't?
I don't think it's concerning.
You think that? Do you think that somebody having to say?
Dylan, can I get back to my goddamn point?
I will, and I'll be quiet for the next 3 minutes if you just let me just ask this one follow-up. So you're telling me, really, legitimately, that the president of the United States requiring somebody answer that the real patriots were the J6 protesters as a requirement to work?
He did not ask if the real patriots were the January 6 rioters.
What was
that? Was not the requirement.
What was the question?
I don't know what the question was, but it wasn't. Do you believe that the real patriots were the January 6 rioters?
That's the report I read, but I mean, whatever. You can go find the other question. I'm happy reading it out. It's indicting.
It's fake news. It's not real. Continue. But anyway, my point was, he is appointing people who don't align with him on a lot of issues, right? If you and I went into business, let's say I ran for president and I appointed you as my, I don't know, DNI, right? Or HHS or whatever, right? You and I can be friends and loyal to each other as friends and whatever, and we're, whatever, buddy and stuff like that. But you and I disagree on a lot of stuff. Right. So somewhere down the line, like, Trump isn't stupid. He knows that if he appoints people that don't agree with him, somewhere down the line, they're going to end up being against him on something. Right. He's not oblivious to this fact. And I think that shows that he's choosing people for reasons outside of loyalty, because these people's loyalty is going to be broken by their ideas. They're not just going to be blindly loyal to Trump when they have their own ideas in their head. They might align more with Trump on certain things than other people at this point. RFK ran his own presidential campaign. Tulsi has run for president as a Democrat. She doesn't agree with him on a plethora of items. RFK doesn't agree with Trump on a plethora of items, and they're going to end up getting into disagreements down the line, and they're likely going to be vocal about those disagreements. I guarantee it at some point.
I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard being a former Democrat really means anything, because I don't really know if she believes anything. Because Tulsi Gabbard went from, no, please look at me in the face and tell me that somebody can go from being a Bernie Sanders supporter who wanted completely socialized medicine, who wanted to destroy the military-industrial complex, who wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and within 4 years transfer from that to being MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. That is not a normal political transformation for an individual at the top of our society who has a well-functioning, well-developed political ideology to go naturally in 4 years, and I can be naturally suspicious of that.
You can be. You have a right to be naturally suspicious of that, but I think that political shifts do happen. I think that people change their ideas. I personally have changed my ideas on a lot of things.
Her changing of ideas has also been very profitable for her. That's very convenient as well.
How has it been profitable for her?
You don't think becoming the top intelligence official in the country at all is going to advantage her in any way?
I mean, sure, but what do you make being the DNI? Like 200K? It's not that much money. It's not like she's making millions of dollars.
If you are within this proximity of the president, you are going to be able to you're going to be able to influence yourself and get money.
Yeah, you're able to influence yourself and get money, but
this guy's cashing in, man.
What do you mean he's cashing in? Trump is not making money from his presidency. He doesn't take a salary.
He's selling Teslas on the front house lawn, the crypto stock. People can buy into the brand of the president of the United States right now by buying those crypto coins, man.
What does that have to? Trump could have done this if he wasn't president. What does this have to do with his presidency?
Don't you think
he could have been selling crypto coins and making billions of dollars off boomers before he was president?
Is there any not to mention all these like cheap ass sneakers and the fucking whatever. But
Dylan, answer me this: do you think that boomers would be buying his sneakers and meme coins if he wasn't president?
Not to the same amount. Not to the same amount. And it's not just about
no way. Come on.
For example, the $5 million meetings. The reports about the selling of meetings for if you donate this much to the Trump campaign right now or to Trump Incorporated, you'll be able to have a high-profile meeting. $1 for one person, $5 million if you want these many people. There were like specific details of what you would have to donate to get certain types of meetings. That you can call it whatever you want. You could say,
and
well,
where do those reports come from, Dylan?
I can send you it afterwards if you want. I can't remember the top of my head, but it was one of the fucking big.
Has anybody been named in the reports?
You mean like
or are they all anonymous reporting?
You could say they're all anonymous sources because I can't remember if they did.
But on top of that, this doesn't surprise me either. Like, when Trump had his campaign app when he ran in 2020, it was like you can have a referral code and download the app, get people to download the app, and you get a certain amount of points for every person who downloads the Trump campaign app. And if you get 100,000 points, you get to go meet Trump at a rally and get a picture with him and hang out with him, whatever. And it's like, this is just like very obvious marketing. Everybody wants to get a picture with Trump.
Should I be able to pay $5 million to have a meeting with the president of the United States?
Should you be able to have a big social media following and get a chance to meet the president of the United States? Because that happens and it's free.
So
and it's not only happened with this president; it's also happened with the last president.
Are you answering a question with a question? Because it's both.
And that's an exchange for marketing. Yes? It's an exchange for marketing, Dylan. So like, if you pay $5 million into the campaign, that's a marketing budget for Trump's campaign, right? If you go and hang out with the president and you have, Dylan, just let me finish this point. Okay. If you have a million followers on social media and you go meet with Joe Biden, that is marketing for him, right?
That is marketing,
because you're meeting with him, it's publicized, you're posting on TikTok in the same way that the money is marketing. It's just marketing, right? And both presidents did this. Joe Biden and Donald Trump did this. Obama did it. So it's not surprising to me at all, and I don't think that it's like any terrible, horrible thing. I think that it's pretty benign.
I think it's bad. I think it's bad to sell $5 million meetings in the White House for people to donate to your campaign. I think that's bad. I think there's a lot of problems with our campaign system, but I think it should be pretty bipartisan for people to say, look, this is something that needs to go away. Whether it's Democrat, whether it's Republican, it needs to go away. Trump's just the most blatant of the people because he doesn't care anymore because he doesn't think there's any checks holding him in place.
there are checks holding him in place, and he knows that. But it just so happens that like giving people the reward of meeting you for donating a lot of money to your campaign isn't illegal.
Okay. What do you think?
And also,
about,
you can go to the White House and see the Oval Office for free.
What do you think about the trading scandal when he was like, time to buy DTG, which is the name of his crypto? Then there was the announcement hours later, stock goes up. Is that something that concerns you?
He didn't say.
Or do you believe that is just how he signs his
He
name,
didn't
like
say time to buy DTG. He said great time to buy in all caps.
And then he
said that to everybody.
And then he put a line, and then he put DTG, which is this tag of his stock.
I didn't see that.
That's the end of
the whole market.
Do you feel silly saying that, by the way? Truth. Every time when we have to talk about his post, he put out a truth today.
I don't use
another truth
social.
has been put out by the president of the United States. Please,
it's true. It's true. He put out another truth.
He put out
another beautiful truth.
Another beautiful truth.
He's telling the truth, man.
Yeah, but that's something you should go look at. It's you can Google it if you want. But oh, I think somebody raided. Thank you so much for the raid, mystery person. I don't know who you were, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so we've gone through a few things. I want to make sure we get through the topics that people want us to talk about. I'm holding Ukraine for last because I don't want to, that's what people obviously want me to ask you about, but we agree on it. So I doubt it's going to actually be that that's confrontational, but people want that. So I wanted to ask you about how you think this tariff situation's going, because are you a Reaganite Republican, or are you a man who represents President McKinley?
I wouldn't even like pin myself to a specific president. I would say that I generally am preferable to the Austrian School of Economics. I'm a capitalist, and I think that we should have free markets, and I obviously prefer a strong economy.
So what do you think of the tariff announcements? I mean, the rollout was interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think the rollout was intentional. He ran on 10% tariffs. He instituted a bunch of crazy tariffs to institute a panic, and it worked. And then everybody forgot that 10% tariffs were fine. We had a 10% market correction, and we had the largest stock market jump in a single day ever in history.
Back to where we were originally.
And by the way, everything, I don't know if you like, right. I don't know if you hold stocks, but like everything was overpriced. But
you don't think
so? Everything was going to go down anyway.
But to be clear, somebody should not get president for breaking their leg and then fixing it. Right.
So if everyone, no, he didn't break his leg and then fix it. He did exactly what he wanted to with virtually. You just said right back to where we were with virtually no stock market repercussions. Right.
Okay, but
so he said everyone said that the tariffs are going to cause the economy to crumble. The stock market's going to collapse. He instituted insane tariffs to institute a panic, and then he put the tariffs that he actually wanted, the 10% that he ran on, and 24% on China, and the stock market literally didn't move. Like from before it happened to after it happened, it's the same, right? So with zero stock market repercussions, he was able to execute the exact tariff plan that he wanted, and not only that, you have virtually the whole world begging for zero tariffs.
So, okay, well, thank God Biden's stock market recovered because they remembered it was Biden's. Or is it Trump's today? But well, we can get into that a bit. I love that. That answer was great. He is such a politician. For a man who hates the politicians, he's the most politician who's ever politician. The good things are the Trump economy. The bad things are the Biden economy. God, it's pretty. I'm more just marveling at him with you. I'm not even trying to go after you with this. It's just beautiful, isn't it? Okay, so
it's beautiful.
These tariff rollouts, they were a mess. Penguin Island.
I don't think so.
I think
they were meant to look like a mess.
If they were meant to look like a mess, then that's a bad idea. I think that the president should look like he has a coherent strategy, and that he should coordinate that strategy with key allies to maximize the effect, because going on a one-man crusade on a 60-front economic war is going to be less effective than concentrating on key objectives against key economic opponents than trying to completely rewrite the entire economic relationship with every country on the planet all at the same time. It didn't work. It depends. It did
work, and you even admit it worked because you just said he fixed the problem, completely forgetting that 10% tariffs were a problem. Well, everyone said that 10% tariffs were deadly and terrible, but as soon as he put 10% tariffs in place and rescinded the 60, 50, 40% tariffs, everyone said, well, he doesn't get an award for fixing the problem. It's like, Oh, so you forgot that 10% tariffs were bad. That's exactly what he put on, what he ran on, 10% tariffs.
The entire economy is not just the stock market, okay? Consumer confidence is at an all-time low that hasn't been this low since the worst days of the pandemic. Investor confidence has sunken pretty terribly.
Not true.
Most economists still
not true. Investor confidence is back up. That's why
it has not gone up.
The stock market is based on investor confidence.
The investor confidence is not fully recovered, and if you want,
because there was a 10% correction.
The investor confidence has not fully recovered, and to be clear, the investor confidence the president's concerned with isn't just do people feel comfortable putting their money in the stock market. The investor confidence he bet on was, do people feel comfortable investing in domestic American manufacturing to such a degree that it's going to be able to make up the difference in a quick enough time so that Americans don't have a long, treacherous, like $10,000 to $15,000 placing upon consumer costs or whatever amount of money it would be, because we haven't shifted all of our iPhones, we haven't shifted all of our production back to the United States. But currently, companies, whether it be GM Motors, who's talking about $4 to $5 billion in losses just this year, or other car companies, are nervous to invest domestically and achieve this goal because they don't know if the tariffs are staying tomorrow. They don't know if they're leaving the next day. They don't know how much of the tariffs, if they do stay, are going to stay in place. They just had another 25% tariff placed upon car parts that are imported, and every single car, including Ford, every single car in this country imports foreign car parts to some extent, whether it be from Canada or Mexico or wherever the fuck. And so while, yes, some investor confidence has recovered as he's rolled back a lot of the scarier tariffs that didn't really make no sense on an individual level, whether it had to do with Vietnam's 90% tariff, calling that a reciprocal tariff rate, to their 1.1% tariff, or talking about Japan as if they have all these high tariff rates, and it really just then comes down to, well, we don't like how regulatory, how many safety precautions are in the cars that you require to be on the streets, and so we're gonna actually have that change. Renegotiating every single. This is what I'm getting to. Let me just get to my point. Doing this all at the same time is a bad idea. If you wanted to go on an economic crusade, he should pick a few countries that are the worst offenders, work with key allies to then isolate those countries with cutting off of trade, with the cutting off of inflows of capital, with trying to coordinate tariffs between the entirety of the West. For example, before in 2015, maybe it would have been better when we had 20% of China's export. Now it's 13%. We get 13% of their export. If we were to work with key allies, we could go as high as 65%. That's a lot more pressure. That's a lot more anger. That's a lot more economic force than our 13%. And so China has been able to hold out so far pretty strong in relation to us because they've been able to have this rally around the flag effect that might not be as powerful if the number is 30% of their trade has been targeted with a 100% tariff instead of just 13%. I'm not saying it convince every ally. You're not going to convince every ally in this economic environment, but if you convince just half of them, a quarter of them, you're going to get a lot more economic bite. But instead, he chose to and fight with our allies as well.
It's not 13%. So I think we take in 13.4% of our imports come from China, but 16% of China's exports come to America. So in that, I think that's just actually a point in my favor. Is like we're very good at diversifying our imports.
16% is a big thing. Okay, let's say it's 16.
Trust me, it's a big deal.
I thought it was 13. It's 16. The difference.
But anyway, the other thing is we have the power over China, right? Because 30 to 35% of all Chinese exports are tied to foreign invested corporations. And most of those foreign invested corporations, about 10% are US companies, and the most of the rest are our allies. Right, so that's a huge problem for China.
So
and if they're not able to,
that's a point in my favor. Why wouldn't we work with our allies to use that pressure and pressure them harder instead of pushing the Chinese, the Japanese, and the South Koreans together? The Chinese and the South Koreans right now are making deals with the Japanese to deepen trade in the Asia Pacific. They're being pushed closer together as a reaction to our sporadic trade policy because they can at least judge what their neighbors are going to do. They have no clue what Trump's going to do.
They're not going to move closer to China. They cannot live without the United States.
They've announced 3 different agreements about it in the last 3 or 4 months. Now you could say, oh, they're never going to do that. You don't understand how much trade Korea and China really has, or Taiwan and China really has, or all these countries in China. That's not to say they don't have security interests, but economically, if they're gonna, I mean, Japan has enough crises as it is. You don't think they're gonna do what's necessary to salvage their economy? Look, all I'm saying is we need to be a lot more careful about this than just deciding, let's fight all the world at once. You know, all the countries that tend to do that don't win.
We are winning. All of those countries are trying to go 0 for 0 with us. The European Union is trying to go 0 for 0 with us. South Korea wants to go 0 for 0 with us.
0 for 0 tariffs.
All of our allies, 0 for 0 tariffs. All of our allies.
So we're not bringing back
other than
American
Japan in recent years have been tariffing the shit out of us for.
So we're not bringing back
extended
American
history.
manufacturing. We're not doing that.
Well, the majority of American manufacturing in question is in China, which is why China has 124% tariff on it, not a 10% tariff.
Well, no, I'm just. If we remove all these trade barriers,
like
when Trump has said that the way we're gonna bring back all the manufacturing back through tariffs,
right.
Wouldn't this just like export the jobs to countries where they can produce cars cheaper? Like, wouldn't this have the exact opposite effect of what Trump's trying to?
No, because if you offset the labor cost with tariffs, the corporations will come back to the United States. We're already seeing this, right? Amazon spent $15 billion to expand their warehouse infrastructure in the United States. Steve Madden's moving back.
So we're going to place tariffs on all these countries. They're going to just take those tariffs lying down. They're not going to respond.
Well, I think it depends on who it is, right? So like our allies, we should coerce them via tariff to go 0 for 0 tariffs with us. The countries that are employing slave labor and stealing American manufacturing, those countries should be tariffed to offset the labor costs. One second, Dylan, let me finish. God damn,
But we're talking about the Trump administration, not you.
Finish. What are you talking about?
That's what we're saying. What we should do. That's not what we're doing.
Well, it seems pretty obvious that this is the plan, right? You have 10% across the board, and you have 124% tariff on China. It's obviously different. It's not the same, right? So the countries that should be targeted are China, India, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. And if in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, we tariffed them to offset the labor cost like we should have, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. But why didn't we do it? Because we were afraid of protectionism. We were afraid of tariffs. And that's why we're in this mess in the first place. And now we have a situation where everybody says, oh, but now, now that it's expensive to import from China, like, oh no, we're all screwed. It's like, okay, well, what if China just said, like, we're not importing to America anymore? Or exporting to America anymore. Okay, now you're equally as fucked, except it's not in your own hands. Right? We shouldn't have our biggest enemy in the entire world producing 13% of everything in this country, primarily like all of our tech. Right? It's a problem. And by the way, like, this isn't going to affect our food supply either, because 85% of all food, tobacco, and beverages consumed in the United States are grown in the United States. It's not going to affect food prices at all.
A lot of the tariffs we placed on countries, like the 10% tariff on Ukraine, I don't know what this helps us with. I don't know how that helps the United States. And I'm just using Ukraine as an example because, obviously I'm in Ukraine. But, I mean, there's a lot of countries where we're placing tariffs that don't seem to have much economic purpose to it. I mean, the Penguin Island thing was just a joke that everybody threw around because it seemed the most ridiculous. But there seemed to just be the idea that we're just kind of taking a hand cannon and we're letting loose to make a statement, right? Because Trump is the ultimate statement maker, and this was his example of it. But the side effect of making that type of statement is that the most of the world thinks that our country doesn't have a plan. When I go and ask people whether or not, when I'm talking to people around the world on a case-to-case basis, now, of course, that's different than what these individual governments are getting in private conversations. But when I talk to most individual people outside of that, they don't think the government has much of a plan. And when I hear about the deals that are being made, I have yet to hear about any decisive victories that makes to shake the consumer confidence, America as a global reserve currency, 10-year yields, or any of these things that we kind of shook a little bit makes it worth it. It'd be one thing if
you can say that the average person you talk to thinks that things are bad or that Trump is crazy or whatever, but like, who cares? The average person, as you and I both well know,
what big victories have we achieved through this for our economy?
Through this specifically, I think it's going to be long-term gain. Hopefully, we're going to see American manufacturing return from China, and we're going to see 0 for 0 tariffs from like the European Union, South Korea, other countries, right? We've already seen 0 for 0 offered from Israel. They're the blueprint. Everyone else should follow it.
Okay, didn't Vietnam and a lot of these countries offer 0 for 0 tariffs basically on day one, and that was rejected? Like, Europe offered 0 for 0 tariffs basically day one, And the reaction for the Trump administration was, that's not good enough.
Right. So the problem, the thing is with a lot of these countries, right? Trump is letting them burn for a little while and showing them how bad it can be if they don't comply. And like, look at China or Canada, for
letting
example,
them
right?
burn.
Canada puts on this big puffy chest and says, we're gonna stand up against America, blah blah blah. It's a bullshit, right? 50% of Canada's imports come from America. You know how many of America's imports come from Canada? Like 15%. You're not gonna fucking do anything. We can live without you. You cannot live without us.
They kind of have to, though, at this point, because of the way we've treated.
Have to what? They can't live without us. 50% of everything they have comes from us.
You know, I really don't.
We are
like
in a
that
better,
we
and
act like
that is the case for the most of the world.
Stage. It's not becoming of the United States.
I think that when other countries are doing the very thing that they complain about, it seems pretty deserving, right? Canada's putting tariffs on the United. I'm not saying that, right? And Trump hasn't threatened to invade them.
He's threatened to invade Greenland and conquer them for a strategic interest.
He hasn't threatened to conquer Greenland. The word conquer has never come out of his mouth.
Okay.
When did play the clip where Trump said conquer? I'm going to conquer Greenland.
Okay, I can tell you exactly what he said, and you can try to spin it whatever way you want. But he was asked specifically in the most recent interview he did with a 3-letter left-wing propaganda communist news outlet, right? The last time he did one of these interviews, he was specifically asked about the use of military force in reference to Canada, and he said probably not, which
come on, Dylan. You know this how Trump operates. Trump doesn't let anyone know his next move.
Let me finish. Okay. He said probably not, right? Which now you could say, oh, this is how Trump operates. If any country said probably not bomb my country, probably not invade, my opinion would be hang the leader of that country by the neck. And I'm just saying that.
No, come on.
I'm being honest. Wait, no.
Trump doesn't.
Please let me finish my statement unless you don't care.
Okay, go.
If you don't care about my opinion, to tell me. But being in this country and listening to people talk about how much they've lost from invasions and conquests, and then hearing Trump make essentially a lot of the same arguments about the artificialness of the American-Canadian border, about, you know, how much better it would be for our strategic interests, that if we conquer this of strategic necessity, and when we talk about that. And then when he moves, he does talk about Greenland of strategic necessity. He talks about it as something that the United States has to have. And when they moved over to Greenland, he said he would not rule it out for Greenland. He explicitly said he would not rule out the use of military force in acquiring Greenland as a territory of the United States. Now, I don't know what you mean by conquer or conquest, and if you think I'm just being too mean by using that word, but that seems to be Donald Trump thinking he's going to Hearts of Iron style annex another country that also happens to be within the NATO alliance, not only damaging the United States' international reputation, not only showing we haven't evolved at all when it comes to the treatment of native peoples, but also shattering NATO.
Lord.
Wait, what do you mean? We're going
Dylan, you know. Come on, Dylan. You know this is exactly. You could ask Trump if he was going to eat dinosaur roast for breakfast, and he would say, "Well, I'm not going to rule it out." Probably not.
Do you think that's good that okay, so if we were talking about like, okay, what should we do in Palestine or whatever, and he said, should we kill all the Palestinians? He said, well, I won't rule it out. Is there like a limit for like I won't rule it out? Like conquering other people's, like, oh, we don't need to rule that out. When it comes to bombing people's homes and firing mortar shots, like war is a serious matter to these people. War is a serious matter, and the Greenlanders are taking it seriously. They think that American bombs could be falling on their houses, possibly in one scenario.
And as far as what you were saying about Canada,
why should America be inspiring that fear in people?
Nobody in Greenland is thinking that America is going to fly F-35s with their houses and drop bombs right now.
How do you know
as far as the things he said about Canada, where you're talking about
says
like
he's serious.
One second, Dylan, where you're talking about like the line between Canada and America being imaginary, and it would be in the strategic interest of America to join forces and for Canada to become part of America. I mean, like, let's be real. Is he wrong? No, he's not wrong. The border is virtually imaginary. You need virtually nothing to cross it if you're an American citizen or a Canadian citizen. It is in the strategic interest of Canada to become part of the United States. And I'm not advocating that we march into Canada and take it. And I'm not advocating right now that we annex Canada. But like what he's saying is fundamentally not true. You know how many active duty soldiers Canada has? 40,000. In the reserves, they have 30,000. In the United States, we have 1.5 million active duty, and we have 1 million reserve. Why does Canada only have 40,000 active duty soldiers? Because they say, oh, we're right next to America. Nothing will happen to us. They use us as a
say
shield.
we won't
right?
defend them. Don't threaten to annex them or do this or that. Like this, that's
He's not.
wrong.
He never.
Cam,
He's not.
Cam, I'm
he,
sorry.
He says jokes. The 51st state. It's hilarious.
He's not joking about Finland. I don't think he's joking about Greenland. I honestly think he's serious. I'm not fucking
he's
with
not
you.
Gonna
I
invade
think he's
Greenland.
serious.
I
don't know if he will. I don't know if he will.
You're talking about the guy who just posted a picture of himself as the Pope.
Cam. Okay, you cannot just it's a meme when we're talking about war. His press secretary was specifically asked by one of your ilk, like a conservative alt media commentator. He did one of these. He said, "Can we do a troll or truth section?" And they were like, "Oh, this is great, ha!" They were all saying "Kumbaya," North Korea style press conference, whatever. And they said truth or fake, and when he said truth or fake, they said this is the two questions they were asked. The first one was truth or fake about Canada becoming the 51st state, and she said truth, and the guy's eyes were, I'm surprised, but he didn't talk about conquering it through military force. But then he was asked Greenland, truth or fake that it has to become part of the United States, and once again it was talked about as truth. It has to become part of the United States. This is of vital national security interest. And to you and to other Americans, the idea of American soldiers getting killed in Greenland by native people filling up car bombs is a very silly image to put in their head. They don't think about it. But we are at the point where he is saying that it's either we have to take it by force or we have to take it some other way. And so
he's not said that. He's not said we need to take it by force or we need to take it some other way. He's not going to march troops into Greenland. I think this is far-fetched.
What then if he's
it's not how he's talking. Saying I'm not going to saying probably not is not saying I'm going to invade Greenland and conquer.
No, that's how he said Canada. You don't understand. He said in Canada I will probably not use military force. Then he went over to Greenland and he said will not take military force off the table in reference to Greenland.
So that doesn't mean that he's going to do it.
I didn't say he was for sure going to. That's why I'm trying to say we shouldn't.
You're still there.
Because it would be bad. It would be bad if the president of the United States was conquering more native peoples. I think that's a mistake we've made enough of in our history. And you can roll your eyes at that, but I also thought we were done with that. I thought, we all saw Pocahontas, Colors of the Wind, Kumbaya bullshit, but apparently no, native people still don't have a right to their land.
Dylan, he's not going to invade Greenland. It's ridiculous.
So are you going to tell me that if he says that we're going to do that, at that point, if he starts moving military assets in at that point, will you say
I'll come on here and say I was wrong. Yep. Well, no, absolutely. We'll do another follow-up.
But you're saying that he also shouldn't. That the president of the United States should not do that. We should not invade Greenland.
I don't think he should. Yeah, of course.
And so that means that the president of the United States should not use every means at our disposal to force Greenland under our control, right?
Sure. Well, what do you mean at all means at our disposal?
That includes
the people of Greenland wanted to become part of it. Right.
They don't want to become part of America. They made that very clear. I mean,
if they did, though, sure.
I mean, if they did, but they don't. They've made very clear they don't want to.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I think But he's made
this one of his crowning first foreign policy goals is talking about annexing Greenland in this way. Why not just say, give us another military base? If that's what we want, just say it. They'll do it. They'll do it. We don't need to fight them over. They'll say, sure, we want the business. Why all this pomp and circumstance? Why is Trump so set on treating people's sovereignty like a punchline?
I don't think that he's what do you mean? Wait, people in Greenland don't have sovereignty. They have no sovereignty. They're part of another state.
They're having an election to determine whether they want to be their own thing or they want to be. I mean, they're deciding their sovereignty right now. And as they're deciding
how many times has that worked?
As they're having their historical decision, they're being told, your vote doesn't even matter. You're going to be like us.
Right. Well, I don't think that there's any situation where they're just allowed to be severed and be sovereign. I don't think they're going to be like
they're
that.
having a vote right now.
At this point, they don't have sovereignty.
Believe that?
You think that means that it's going to come into fruition?
I am 100%. I guess you're just not paying attention to European or Danish politics. And this
wait, hold up. Just because they have a vote to give them sovereignty doesn't mean they're going to be granted it.
I didn't say that they're going to be. Number one, the Danish government has endorsed the election. They said that this election is they're hosting it. It's under it's a Danish election happening in Greenland where they've made the decision. And This is my problem, man. We have a bunch of Americans talking about conquering lands they know nothing about, and they're having an election to determine whether Greenland, because of its native history, because of its separate history from Denmark, should go off and do its own thing or stay part of Denmark. And as that conversation's happening, Trump has injected himself into the conversation and said, you're going to be the 51st state, without consulting the people of Greenland, who overwhelmingly, when polled, I think the number was 4%. Or like 5% want to be part of the United States.
That's Dylan. That's fine. I don't think that Denmark is going to let Greenland go. I don't think that Greenland is going to become part of the United States. I also don't think Canada is going to become part of the United States. I think it's posturing.
So you think if they have a vote that Greenland and they vote to separate, Denmark will like crack down?
Maybe,
we'll see, like,
maybe. I think that's probably more likely than Greenland becoming a part of the United States. I think that Trump is obviously posturing.
So you think that the tariffs are posturing. You think the fascist Danish crackdown is more likely than a Trump invasion?
No. I said that the severance between Denmark and Greenland is more likely than
gotcha.
like a United States annexation of Greenland.
There we go. Okay.
I think that that's more likely.
I agree with that. I very much agree with that. Okay, let's get to the last two topics of the day, which are going to be connected, because I don't want to keep you here all day.
I got a riot to attend here pretty soon.
Got you. Okay, so I won't keep you too much longer. So, do you believe that the Israeli government should be bombing Syria?
Do I think that the Israeli government should be bombing Syria? Yeah, Hezbollah targets,
like
for sure.
Right now.
Hezbollah target? Yeah, I think when there's a vacuum, they should be making as much ground to separate themselves from Hezbollah, who routinely lights northern Israel on fire as they can. Yeah, for sure. I was just at the Syrian border recently.
Okay. But what about all the strikes that are not on Hezbollah targets? Because all of the recent strikes that I've seen...
Like what?
Well, all of them. I mean, all of the recent strikes have not...
And do you know they're not on Hezbollah? How?
Because they're on government storehouses, and it's the most publicized airstrikes in Syrian Israeli history. It was the largest set
government
of
storehouses full of weapons in...
I wasn't finished my sentence. You mean, okay, government storehouses outside of Damascus, government storehouses in the west of the country, does government storehouses in the north of the country, government storehouses in the south of the country, the government storehouses all over the country. The largest set of Israeli airstrikes in Syrian history was not during the Syrian civil war. It was after the end of the Syrian civil war, where the Israeli government went in and blew up all of Assad's old chemical weapons storage facilities. He blew up a ton of his tanks, a bunch of all the stuff that was about to be turned over to the new Syrian government. And that's when Israel went in and struck and destroyed all of that equipment, because they didn't want it to go into the hands of the new Syrian government. That's also when we found out that the Israeli government and the Assad regime were working hand in hand in the transferring of information, and the Assad regime was allowing the Israelis to use their airspace to strike Hezbollah targets in return for basically the Israelis allowing them to continue the civil war and not like crack down upon them harder. And that they knew where the chemical weapon storage facilities were, and they didn't blow them up. They knew where their weapons were, they didn't blow them up. And so when those weapons were being used against Syrian civilians, the Israeli government could have done something, and they chose to do nothing, because they thought that the devil they knew in Bashar al-Assad was better than whatever would come after, which could be maybe something not as bad, but it could be worse for Israeli interests, because it might be a dictator that might challenge them where Assad was too weak.
No, I don't think so. I mean,
you said earlier today that you said earlier today you want Syria to be destabilized. So I mean,
oh, absolutely, yeah. And so I'd love to. You've said a lot. I want to give my position on this.
So that philosophy is what Israel did. They kept Syria destabilized by not cracking down hard enough to eject Assad, but hard enough to take out Hezbollah targets.
Yeah, so perfect. You said Israel didn't do anything about the weapons being used against Syrian civilians, but they did stop them, like they were striking Hezbollah, right? Okay, great. Well, good thing is Israel doesn't have an obligation to protect Syrian civilians. The Syrian government has an obligation to protect Syrian civilians, and Israel doesn't have to expend its assets to protect Syrian civilians, especially when those Syrian civilians are largely anti-Israel and would kill any Jew given the chance. On top of that, why might they strike a deal with Bashar al-Assad that allows them to strike Hezbollah targets for them to ignore the civil war? Well, it's probably because, like, first of all, Israel doesn't know who's going to win the civil war, right? It could be Bashar al-Assad wins. It could be that HTS and the Free Syrian Army wins, right? It could go either way. We don't know how it's going to go. But what Israel knows right now is these guys are fighting. They're destabilizing each other. That's good for them because Iran is backing Bashar al-Assad, and they're allowing Hezbollah to operate in southern Syria and strike northern Israel, right? So of course Israel's going to take that opportunity to sweep out Hezbollah targets, destroy munitions depots that Hezbollah is using to strike Israel. And of course, after the war is over and Hezbollah retreats back up into the northern part of the country, of course they're going to take that opportunity to capture a buffer zone and to destroy weapons depots that previously belonged to the Assad regime, but now belong to the new regime, but ultimately are going to be used by Hezbollah. Why else would there be weapons depots in southern Syria?
No, you don't mean that. You don't mean that.
What do you mean? I don't mean what?
Okay, so the new.
Do you think these weapons depots weren't being used by Hezbollah or what?
The Assad regime was giving.
I promise you they were.
Okay, the weapons depots that were blown up were going to be going into the possession of Hayatir al-Sham, which is a major opponent of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah killed their men, women, and children in like horrific
ways. But where is his military? Where is his military in southern Syria right now, or are they not in southern Syria? No, they're not. No, they're not. Israel is in southern Syria.
Wait.
Israel is advanced past the border, and they're in southern Syria right now.
Okay, so, they're both in southern Syria, because the reason that the Israeli government went into, well, let me ask you this question. What is the Israeli government's stated position for going into southern Syria?
To create a buffer zone.
Okay.
They captured Mount Hermon to prevent, like, so basically, like, if you've ever like seen this area, right? It's like you have a huge mountain range that looks down into what's basically a bunch of from Mount Hermon. It looks down into like a huge farming area that is the Galilee region of northern Israel, right? And so routinely Hezbollah and other terror groups have been lighting that area on fire and killing civilians. And so Israel's taking the opportunity to prevent that from happening in the future.
A very legitimate risk if Hezbollah had a presence down there.
What's stopping them from coming back?
What they're saying is not what you're saying. What they're saying is that the Druze militias and the Druze people of southern Syria are being abused. They're being killed. They're being slaughtered. And so on top of their usual demands of the buffer zone and, of course, expanding, which the Golan Heights was supposed to be the buffer zone. So we need a buffer zone for the buffer zone. And later we're going to need a buffer zone for the buffer zone of the buffer zone. And then the buffer zone of the buffer zone of the buffer zone.
You don't think this is true? You don't think this is true?
I think it's true because that's what they're doing right now.
It's very, you're doing this like Israel territorial expansion thing, but it's the dumbest argument ever because Israel has almost given up more territory than they've ever taken, right? They gave up the Sinai Peninsula, which was twice the size of Israel. They've given up the West Bank.
We're not talking about.
Okay, do you know how big the Golan Heights are? You can travel the entire Golan Heights in 2 hours.
That's a lot of territory to annex.
It is not a lot of territory. It is small as fuck. It is teeny tiny.
People that were displaced, for all the people that was displaced, the Druze that are still there. But we're getting off the point. The point is, the Israelis said that
the Druze that are there that now have rights and aren't slaughtered by Israel, or slaughtered by Syria. I don't know what the argument is there.
Well, I would say that the Druze should be able to determine their own future. I mean, that's their decision.
It seems like they have. They enjoy living in Israel.
Some Druze enjoy
living in Israel. They hate the Syrians that are attacking them routinely and blowing their children up.
Cam, you should not speak on behalf of people you aren't. The Druze, there are Druze that did fight for the Israeli government.
Regurgitating what they've said.
You talk to them?
I've talked to Druze people, yeah. And I've also heard Druze people speak.
Okay, so you spoke to...
Like outside of my personal interactions.
Okay, that's good. But as far as I know, the majority of Syrian Druze do not want the Israelis to invade Syria. From all of my interactions with the Druze that I know, and from all the polling, but or from all there are specific leaders that want that, but the call that they're making is that they need to go into southern Syria to protect the Druze people. But apparently, we already agree on this, that this is a bad excuse that the Israeli government's using, right? Because you said earlier that they don't have a responsibility to protect anybody in Syria. Syrian civilians is not their responsibility. So Israel doing anything to invade Syria to claim to protect anybody, or airstrikes outside of Damascus to protect Druze, which is what their stated
Just because you don't have
was.
just because you don't have an obligation to doesn't mean that you can't. First of all, but sure, I would agree that this is like the weaker reason. If it's a two-tiered reason,
it would be kind of weird.
The primary reason is to protect the Druze that are living in northern Israel to protect the Jews that are living in northern Israel.
I just kind of find where
have you seen the photos of the Galilee region of Israel?
Though, but you leave the chemical weapons alone, but you then do airstrikes after the civil war to protect civilians. I just don't believe that.
They left the chemical weapons alone because they had a bigger target, right? Their people were under direct threat at the time that they were striking depots in southern Syria, right? When they had this deal going with Assad, they had a bigger threat. Their northern region was regularly being lit on fire, and their people were being killed. Their crops were being burned. You know the SpongeBob episode where it's like, he burned our crops, he poisoned our water supply, and he brought a plague upon our... Like, this is literally happening in northern Israel, right? So, of course, they have a bigger threat, so they're dealing with that at the time.
Yeah.
Yep, we're doing the SpongeBob.
SpongeBob, yes. But I think...
It's literally happening in northern Israel.
Well, you know, that's... I like that cartoon, so... But
and on top of that, the Golan Heights, the water Syria, in the Galilee runs from the Golan Heights.
In Syria, there is, as of right now, a new government trying to establish control over the country that is very adversarial to basically all of Israel's enemies, because most of them are Shia. And because of Hayatir al-Sham's background and the fact that they do have, you know, some, let's just say, strong religious...
You don't think that matters? You don't honestly think that matters?
You don't think that matters? You don't think any of this matters?
No, Iran is a Shia regime and Hamas are Sunni. You don't think that matters? Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They're Islamic fundamentalists.
Well, let me finish my second sentence then. Then the other thing would be that Hayatir al-Sham spent the entirety of their career fighting them. So I think that would probably be another layer on top of it. So there's both religious affiliation and a lot of bloody history that have divided them from Iran's proxies, which spent so much of its resources defending Bashar al-Assad and keeping him in power.
But it doesn't matter, because ultimately they are Islamic fundamentalists, and a first-degree hadith says the day of judgment will not come about if the Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. Ultimately, they will turn on Israel, and so Israel is doing a cleanup job in southern Syria and preventing them from having weapons that will kill their people, whether they be Druze or Jews.
So you say that the only way that Syria exists with these guys is as like firing missiles into, like, the first chance they get, they're going to fire missiles, they're going to attack Israel. These guys
Of course they're going to turn on Israel.
They're going to turn on Israel.
They're literally a fucking Al-Qaeda splinter. You know who Al-Qaeda is, right? They're the guys who like flew the planes into the buildings and cited, Israel, U.S. support for Israel, September 11th, 2001.
What happened then?
And they literally cited U.S. support for Israel as a reason for doing it. Like, I don't know. What do you mean? What happened?
I personally,
we invaded Afghanistan and whooped some ass.
This summer, I was going to enjoy going to the Trade Center. Has there been an incident?
Has there been an incident since?
Well, no. Was there an incident at the Trade Center? I was going to visit the Trade Center in New York. Was there an incident?
There was an incident.
What happened?
There was an incident in 2001. There was some according to Jake Shields, the Jews, they flew some planes into the buildings.
Well, I had no clue. That's my.
It was actually Israel did it.
I'll be sure to tell everybody. That's what you told me.
Yeah, and so that was Al-Qaeda, and these guys are an Al-Qaeda splinter, and they cited, again, U.S. support for Israel as a reason for flying these planes in the building. I know you're not familiar with the incident, but this is what happened.
This is my first. I never heard of the incident before. I never heard of the incident. That's really terrible.
So anyway, like, these people will inevitably turn on Israel. I would have preferred like the Free Syrian Army have taken over, but obviously they're the weakest link. The Middle East
is full of a lot of people who've done a lot of fighting of the United States. And when it comes to these guys, look, they're pretty extreme. I wouldn't want them running my education program. I wouldn't hold my hand walking down the street, with a guy in his Syria. But let's also say that they fought Al-Qaeda. They did fight Al-Qaeda after splintering with Al-Qaeda and did a bunch of infighting with a bunch of other groups in the region. And
sure,
let's be clear that so far they have not attacked Israel. They say that they don't want to attack Israel. And right now, I think that, you can have whatever dedication, whatever God you want. Okay, I don't know your faith, Cam Higby, but the God that is present in every man's chest is starvation, poverty, These are the gods that are very present in people's everyday lives. And when you go to Syrians, there's whole swaths of the country that can't get power, people can't eat, people can't drink, people want their services attended to, and they do not want a suicidal war with Israel when they have no air force. And the Israelis,
they for sure do.
And the Israelis,
they're literally jihadists.
You think
that's exactly what they want? They're suicidal. They're literally suicidal. They flew planes into fucking buildings and killed themselves. They're literally suicidal. And you can say that they fought Al Qaeda after they splintered. That's fine. Okay, well the Al Qaeda fought the Mujahideen after they splintered. Like, who the fuck cares, right? They still are Islamic fundamentalists. Mujahideen means to carry out jihad.
It is not. Okay, Al-Julani, okay, or Al-Shara, whatever you want to call him now, until he transitions again, okay? When he does not equal Syria, okay? These guys took out Assad because they're at the right place at the right time. They perfected drone warfare.
Don't get me wrong. I'm aware.
Let me finish. So they have to be totally aware to the concerns of the Syrian people. They're supposed to be hosting another election. They're supposed to be regional control. I don't like a lot of people from the SNA and other guys that are being appointed to military positions. But at the end of the day, right now, they're in no position to attack Israel. Israel's fighting supposedly a two-front war against Hezbollah and Gaza. And so if the policy position is that we're going to invade Syria until eventually they have a secular democratic state that is within lines of our liberal values, then that means that we're probably not going to see a deoccupation of Syria within my or your lifetime, man. And I don't think I don't think how you bring peace to the Middle East. And I don't think you hold those standards for whether or not you're not
gonna have peace with jihadists. Okay, first of all, and I don't think that the overall representative opinion of every Syrian is that Israel should die and we're jihadists, right? It just happens that a jihadist group took over. Like, the Free Syrian Army are not jihadists. The Kurds are not jihadists. Unfortunately, you have an element of ISIS in Syria too. But like, I'm not saying that every Syrian thinks that Israel needs to die or whatever. But unfortunately, you have jihadists whose primary enemy in the entire world are Jews, who believe that they can't have their equivalent of the rapture until every Jew has been killed. Unfortunately, those people are the people who are in charge. And whether or not they're capable of fighting Israel right now is irrelevant, because at some point they will be capable of fighting Israel, and they will. Okay? I would much prefer somebody else to be in charge of Syria, but unfortunately, that's just not the reality we live in. We live in a reality where there is a Islamic fundamentalist group in charge of Syria, and you can say they're going to have democratic elections, but I would just ask you, name me one singular time ever in history that an Islamic fundamentalist group or an Islamist government in general has ever held a legitimate election. The answer is never. Never has that ever happened. And you can cite like the 2006 PA election, but the PLO is not an Islamic fundamentalist group. They're a secular group, and they held an election, and guess who won? An Islamic fundamentalist group, Hamas. And has there been an election since? No, there has not been an election since. Because they're dictators. They're always dictators who allow their people to rape children and marry children, rape their wives. They don't allow women to leave their houses without permission of a male guardian. Whatever. The basics.
Okay,
it's not going to happen. Jihadists don't hold elections.
Okay, so we'll see what happens. When it comes to like political representation in Syria and political jihad or political Islam in Syria, I don't necessarily think that political Islam in Syria is like either ISIS or it's either ISIS or it's not political Islam. I could see a certain strand of this developing where they go as far as they can get away with, which might not actually be that far at all. We'll have to wait and see, because it seems in most big Syrian cities, it seems to be generally urban and cosmopolitan. People can drink alcohol still in a lot of urban environments. Like, now that might change if they've been able to get a strong grip on the country, but we don't even know if there's going to be a strong grip on the country. And so until Israel understands that there's a legitimate threat from the Syrian government, which doesn't have an air force, I don't think invading and expanding your buffer zone and antagonizing the Syrian people, who just went through 13 years of civil war and is trying to reorient itself to its neighbors after, being under siege for years after years after years. I don't think that invading and conquering and bombing because you care about the Jews, I don't think this is helping. I don't think more interventionism is helping.
You're spelling it out for me. You're making the argument for me. It's like they're gonna at some point be pressured to have an election, and at that point they are going to crawl their asses to Iran, and they're going to say, we need support. We don't want to have elections. We want to remain Islamic dictatorships. And then Iran is going to say, kiss the ring.
Don't push them to Iran.
No, it's not about, nobody's pushing them. It's they're going to be pushed to have an election. And if you push them to have an election, they're going to be pushed to Iran. And then they're going to crawl to Russia and say, guys, we want to be dictators. We need airplanes. Please give us airplanes. And just like they always do.
Years. They have every motivation in the world not to suck up to them unless you push them in their direction. If you
Russia will be absolutely floundered to provide airplanes to any Islamic dictator in Syria.
Why does it? Okay, if this is the case, why should Trump? You agree with me? Trump should stop selling any weapons to the Saudis, pull all support from the Saudis, stop making deals with the Saudis.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Do you believe that it's impossible?
I don't agree with Trump on everything.
So you agree that it's impossible for the Saudis?
I think that the Saudis are in a unique position because they're world-class oil producers.
You answered a question I didn't ask. My question was, do you believe it's impossible for the Saudis to make peace with Israel?
No, I don't think it's impossible for the Saudis.
But they're Islamic fundamentalists.
I think that they're in a hindered position to make peace with Israel because again, like a lot of the people,
air force.
A lot of the people in the
They're extremely economically powerful. They can do much more damage to regional powers than the Syrian people currently can. And that's not to say. And what have the Saudis ever supported, or have any of its princes ever ended up supporting?
I don't know. I'm no fan of the Saudis, bro.
My point is,
I'm not a fan of the Saudis.
So should
I view the Saudis our relationship with the Saudis as like a more utilitarian relationship.
Should Israel strike the Saudis then?
I don't know, because the Saudis aren't like the world leading sponsor of terrorism, right? Whereas Iran is.
Al-Jilani is.
And I'm not necessarily. I'm not advocating for a like war between Israel and Iran. Neither of them can fight that war, right? Neither are capable of a cross-continental.
Stop talking about Syria like they're Iran. These powers have very different interests.
Iran and Syria have very different interests.
Yes.
But they're fundamentally aligned on some things. They
fought a 13-year-long civil war. Even if they have some, by the way, that one ideological
and now they've won it, and they're in a position of power to gain the favor of Iran.
Why would you push them into the arms of the Iranians? You would want to make them offers or deals that could push them in a different direction.
They're by default pushed into the arms of Iran. They're jihadists, just like the Iranians.
There's many different types of jihadists, and a lot of jihadists hate the Iranians.
No. No, not really.
You know what? There's just one big jihadist, and they're all jihadi. Okay, if that's your position, we fundamentally disagree.
There are different types of jihadists, but fundamentally, a jihadist is going to be more likely to align with another terrible jihadist than they are to align with the West.
So this is that's my what? Well, yeah, but if those jihadists have very different views, like who should be in charge, or very different religious.
Those are overshadowed because who should be in charge? Who should be in charge is not dictated by the word of God. Killing people is.
By the way, actually, that who should be in charge is dictated by the word of God, according to whatever. I don't want to get too.
If you're going to talk about like the Jordanians and the Hashemites, then like there could potentially be some allegations there, right? But like overall.
My Lebanese friends
like
are
in Syria
right now. They're not happy with you. Please.
God isn't going to come down and say,
I got this.
God isn't going to come down and say like Bashar al-Assad should be in charge or HTS should be in charge, right? But how you should dictate and govern yourself is dictated by God, like, or they think it's dictated by God, right? I don't like. I'm not a Muslim.
Why did the Iranians cripple themselves in Syria to stop these guys from coming to power if it's so easy for
because
them
they preferred Assad? Because they preferred Assad.
But they crippled themselves to the point that fighting the Israelis in the last waves was much more difficult because they lost so many fighters in Syria. Why invest so much if it was that easy? If it doesn't matter?
Iran's not. Wait, what do you mean? Iran fights through proxies, so they're not losing soldiers in Syria. They still have an entire army of soldiers in Hamas
is one
in
of
Gaza.
Their main tools in the Middle East for influence and aggression against Israel. They were their main tool in fighting for the regime of Bashar al-Assad. They crippled that tool, and then when they used it against the Israelis, it was crippled, and that hurt them a lot in their fight against Israel in the last few years. That is a legitimate calculation they made, that they accounted for that risk. still made the bet. Why make that bet?
That does not mean that Iran is not going to use them at any point.
I didn't say that it didn't mean that. I'm saying
and
that
this
why
idea,
would they cripple
that
themselves?
because Iran is Shia and they're Sunni doesn't mean anything, because again, Hamas are Sunni.
What does religion
Like,
matter in religion? You know, it's all kind of just stupid.
No, it does.
whatever.
It does matter. It does matter. But when you have a common goal, you're going to act on that common goal, right? It doesn't matter if you're this splinter of Islam or you're this splinter of Islam, because again, we see
what
Iran routinely work with Sunnis.
What's that? But all this religious civil war. But they fought. They specifically fought for 13 years. It'd be one thing if we were talking about previous developed ties that they could build upon. They don't have those ties. They killed each other for 13 years.
Right, because it's a new government. Right, but fine. That's fine. That doesn't mean they're not going to work together.
Okay, if you put them in that position, then you might bring about that outcome. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
We fought Britain for what must have been upwards of 13 years, right?
Yeah, and how many years did it take us before we were on the same side? How long?
I don't know.
It didn't take us a few months, okay? It took us hundreds of years. Okay.
Well, we didn't have a crazy, terrible, extremist religious belief that brought us together.
Okay.
So.
One last thing on Israel. They got to stop working with the Russians, right?
Israel?
Yeah.
To what capacity are you speaking?
They're defense companies.
They're defense companies? Sure. What are you gonna talk about, like selling weapons or something?
Well, yeah, they sell the machine parts that are necessary to build S-500s and their highest quality aircraft.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree.
You would agree with that? Okay. Why do you think Trump hasn't like pressured them in any way on this, or like, hey, like if we're gonna pressure
what aircraft parts do you think they're selling to Russia? Israel doesn't manufacture aircraft.
Well, no, I'm saying to be clear, they manufacture the tools to make the aircraft. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay,
you know,
fine.
like CNC
Sure.
machines, stuff like that. These are things that are vital to expand Russian war production.
Sure. Fine.
Okay.
I would agree that they should not sell those to Russia.
Okay, so I don't need to go through the list or anything of all the companies working. We can just agree that's bad?
No, it's fine. Yeah, I would just agree.
Fantastic. Okay, that was easy. Didn't feel like pulling teeth on that one. Okay, lastly, where's my peace deal, man? Where's my peace deal? I was waiting.
I don't know. I don't know. You should probably ask Zelensky to stop like demanding like that the U.S. agree to get involved if Russia doesn't hold up.
What?
That's what Zelensky wants. He wants defense assurances.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And not defense assurances in terms of sending weapons. He cited them as separate things. He wants defense assurances in terms of like the U.S. is going to directly intervene in the war if Russia breaks the ceasefire, which Trump doesn't want to do, nor would any American leader want to do.
Well, I think
would start a world war.
You would want to.
That's why Trump said, "You're playing with World War III. You're playing with. You don't have the cards."
So he said he wanted assurances for a peace deal. That any peace deal that they would make, they would have.
He wanted defense assurances.
Yes, defense assurances.
He said he wanted defense assurances, which is
for a peace deal. You said a ceasefire, right? Ukrainians already offered a unilateral.
Sure, regardless, I don't think it matters.
Well, no, it does matter because that's what made Trump.
No, I don't think so. Because it doesn't matter whether it's a ceasefire, Dylan, whether it's a ceasefire or whether it's a peace deal, if that deal is made and it's agreed to by both sides and then one side breaks that deal, it doesn't matter the substance of the deal. It just matters that the United States is not going to put boots on the ground. That is what matters, right? There is no situation where it is justified for the United States to get directly involved in this war, because that would literally start a World War III and risk a nuclear holocaust, which Trump does not want to be responsible for.
Did you get weaker on this?
Listen, what do you mean? Did I get weaker on this? No, I still support Ukraine. But what Zelensky tried to pull at the White House was total bullshit. It was like the most brain dead thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's like he agreed to the ceasefire.
Is this your position, really?
He agreed to this deal with Rubio, which I actually think was a good deal for the most part, right? Like, I think a lot of people really underestimate like the United States being involved in like rare earth mining in Ukraine, because that actually gives them defense assurances, because Russia is going to be far less likely to attack Ukraine, knowing they could potentially hurt Americans. Yeah, of course I do.
No, you don't.
Of course, Russia is going to be less likely to harm Americans, like if they know that they're going to harm Americans.
That's a crock.
I'm surprised you don't.
Your point, but
I'm surprised you don't believe this.
No, I don't believe you actually believe
this.
it. That's my genuine opinion. I don't believe you believe that.
You believe it?
I never believed it. No, I think that's the cop-out answer for somebody who doesn't want to dedicate themselves to Ukraine. I really don't.
Well, that was Zelensky's idea.
Well, no, it wasn't Zelensky's idea for this. It was kind of his original idea was we want more aid. how can we get more aid, military aid, from a guy who keeps talking about how we're scamming him with fake numbers? Well, maybe we can offer him, this big deal where he can get access to our minerals in return for more aid. And then Trump came in and said, "Oh, that's great. We'll use that to cover all of the stuff you've given us up to this
he
point."
pressed on this in the press conference. He specifically pressed on the fact that he wanted American citizens in Ukraine to make it less likely for a Russian invasion in the future. That was specifically what he said.
That's separate. You were just asking me a separate question. The separate part, the separate thing he wants for a long term. This is something he wants to any means possible.
Deep financial ties.
And he wants to make, and his point about this is very true. I don't think the financial ties are going to do anything. I think that you guys completely misunderstand how the Russians behave. If you think a trade deal here or a trade deal there is going to be necessary to stop the Russians.
But generally, financial ties will result in more Americans in Ukraine and more risk that you get American retaliation due to dead Americans.
I think the real way you get American retaliation
I agree with
is U.S. soldiers. It's not with the idea. I mean, if I blew up tomorrow, the Trump administration would do fucking nothing. Let's be for real. Right? Because they have done nothing up to this. If the Russians came up, kidnapped me, shot me in the back of the head, released a video about it, there would be little to no reaction, I think, of the Trump administration. I would be surprised if the Trump administration would even say it was bad. I honestly would be surprised because
of course, I think there would definitely be a reaction if it made it to American press. There would definitely be a reaction for sure.
And
I think I agree with you on this. I think
every day, and it doesn't get a peep.
I think I agree with you. I don't hear about it in the American press either. I think the American journalists should do a better job of covering that stuff.
And Trump
I think that America. I agree with you that Trump should react to it. I think that America has been incredibly weak on American citizens dying or being kidnapped abroad. I think that we should also be, maybe putting a little bit more pressure on Hamas for still having American citizens held hostage in Gaza and having killed several. But hey, here we are. The Biden administration didn't do anything, and it seems that the Trump administration isn't putting enough pressure on them either. And I don't necessarily support all of these brain dead, phony peace negotiation talks that are happening.
The thing. I mean, yeah, they're all. Steve Witkoff's a moron. I'm not going to ask you to defend Steve Witkoff's cavalcade of idiotic statements or diplomatic blunders as he goes into a room with the biggest Russia experts in the world, and he has a Russian translator provided by them. It's just the most basic mistakes of diplomacy being made by a real estate mogul with no experience in the field, who also happens to be managing every other foreign policy crisis that Trump has at the moment. This is not good peacemaking. The peacemaking attempts have been a failure. But back to the Zelensky meeting, everything Zelensky said in that meeting ended up being true. Every single thing he said. Now you can say he said it. For example, he said that the Russians are not to be trusted in this negotiation process because they have violated every single ceasefire that they have signed. And then in response, the Trump administration got angry because they thought that he was basically sinking the ceasefire stuff before they had really begun.
He was sinking the ceasefire stuff.
But
he was by adding a new modifier to it that wasn't in the agreement. He announced a new modifier to the agreement at the press conference. Is so disrespectful.
That's not true. That's not what he said.
Absolutely, he did.
Let me finish.
Absolutely, he did.
You could say that, but he started bringing up his concern to the public because Zelensky is a media guy, probably the same way Trump is, and he understands that this is one of the few times he's going to be able to speak to the American public. And so what he tried to do, leveraging one of the few skills he has, is try to grab the attention of the country by making his case about what's about to happen, is that we're going to do this process and the Russians are going to break it. What happened? The Russians broke it within 2 hours of the agreement that Trump signed. Trump, the guy that the war would have never happened. The war would have never happened if Trump invaded, but immediately signed ceasefires, and the Russians embarrass him again and again.
He tried to demand direct U.S. intervention if another attack were to have happened. I don't care. Of course I support Ukraine, and I don't want this to happen, but if Russia marched on Kiev tomorrow, it's still not justification for U.S. boots on the ground that would cause a World War III and a nuclear holocaust. I do not give a fuck. There is no justification.
You're fear-mongering. The one he
I'm not fear. You don't think that a direct military escalation between Russia and America would cause a world war?
I believe that.
You don't think that?
Do you want me to answer your question? Okay. I believe that if we got a peace deal, and at that point the United States, after the war was supposed to be over, said, okay, the way we're going to stop another one is by saying if you invade again, our Marines in Kiev are going to come out and meet you, that would probably almost certainly stop another invasion. Just like
I agree with you that having a military base could be a good thing.
Okay, so I agree with you. That's what Zelensky wants.
That is not what he asked for. He asked for mutual defense assurances.
He said, by the way, that is a mutual defense assurance. When you have troops on the ground, it's a mutual defense assurance. You're putting lives on the line. That makes it so you have to respond. And then you make it incredible by putting lives on the line. So, yes, it would be a mutual defense assurance once the war is over to stop another war.
But having a military base in the country is different than saying we will deploy our troops to fight Russia, which would undoubtedly cause a world war. If an attack on one, one sec. An attack on one is an attack on all. So you've already got the entirety of NATO involved. And then, of course, China's going to jump in and Iran's going to jump in, and you have a full-fledged World War III.
You don't think Ukraine should be in NATO?
What's that?
You don't think Ukraine should be in NATO?
I'm not making a statement one way or the other. They certainly shouldn't be in NATO right now because it would be.
Why? What's with the dodgy answer? You're not a.
No. I don't care. Like,
just give an answer.
We're not gonna. It doesn't matter because we're not gonna let Ukraine into.
Just answer.
Dylan, if you let me finish, we're not going to allow. You would never. So if you have a mutual defense pact that says an attack on one is an attack on all, you're not going to add a country that is currently at war to that mutual defense pact unless you are basically saying, look, you have. See this? It says war. Right?
Yeah.
This is us signing on to the war right here.
Dramatic,
now everybody's involved.
Yeah,
so now you have the entire NATO involved in the war. And what do you have? You have a World War III. That's what you have.
Zelensky's acknowledged this.
Ukraine joined NATO. One second, Dylan. One second. Let me finish. You asked me a question. After the war is a different story. But if they join NATO right now, you would have a World War III by default.
So after the war,
there's no way out of it.
That Zelensky and most experts say they would have to join NATO. Once the war's over, to stop Russia from invading again, should Ukraine be allowed to join NATO?
Yes, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Yes.
Okay. So
again, Dylan, so we don't disagree on this like virtually at all. I support Ukraine.
I think we disagree.
I support the United States giving aid to Ukraine on some areas. Sure, people are gonna disagree on some areas of every topic. You're never gonna find somebody who's a carbon copy of your ideology.
Okay, so I just gotta throw out there, JD Vance needs to be out of high-profile interactions.
I think he did great.
Anymore.
I think he did great.
He's acted like such a fucking baby bitch, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I just. I love JD. What Zelensky said in that meeting, it might not be the most polite towards a ceasefire effort, but it was all correct about the ceasefire effort. And it'd be one thing, and look, it's one thing to say, look, towards the ceasefire effort, it was not very hopeful, but that's because everything he said was right. The ceasefire, I mean, I
don't care if I agree with you. What he said was right. That's fine. That's totally fine. What he said was right, but you don't get to make an agreement premeditated.
At Zelensky for telling the truth.
You don't. And you're right, because I'm not mad at him for telling the truth. I'm not mad at him for telling the truth, Dylan. You are missing the point. What I am upset about is the fact that they had an agreement worked out through him and our lead diplomat here, Secretary of State. Right? Okay. So they have a deal baked out. Now they're doing a press conference to announce the deal, that the deal will be signed tonight. And what does Zelensky do? Oh, well, now I have this surprise term that I want to add to the deal that nobody knew about until this point, and it's a deal that can't, or a term that can't be achieved, right? A requirement that would require the United States to get involved in this war.
That's not what he said. I don't know why you're retelling this event. Like, they didn't say.
I'm not retelling it. He wanted defense assurances and the United States to get involved in the war. Was Russia to make escalations?
He did not say America declare war on Russia. He said
he didn't know.
He wanted
defense assurances.
About the fact that he didn't have defense assurances, not about the fact that in order to sign this deal, we must have defense assurances. The only way I'll sign the deal. He said, like, look, we're getting to the end of this deal. We're going to sign the mineral deal. And then he said, look, we still need to figure out these defense assurances because the Russians are going to violate the deal just like they violated every other one. Then they got really pouty because like, oh, how could you say that? And then he was right.
He was demanding defense assurances, and he used the press as a tool. He is a dodgy bitch. I support Ukraine, but I think that Zelensky is a dodgy, backstabbing bitch.
Okay, to be clear, I think President Trump doesn't care about the Constitution, and he'd slit Liberty's throat in a second if it make him a nickel.
That's fine.
If it made him a nickel.
That's fine. That's fine.
Dodgy bitch, unconstitutional bastard. I hope we both got it out of our system.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so I think
it'd be like if we agreed to a debate and we're doing like timed speaking, and I showed up with like an additional partner and you only had 10 minutes to speak. I said, oh, like no, like we agreed it was 20 minutes. Like I'm doing 20 minutes speaking. You're doing 10. I'm doing 20, and I have an extra partner. Like, no, you don't get to just.
I don't know why you're saying that was an addendum to the agreement. He just complained about the fact that we still hadn't hammered that out, which is a completely valid complaint.
He was demanding that there was defense assurances.
Okay, people can go back and watch it. He said he was a general demand, not a demand as part of this negotiation, or saying if we don't sign, we either do this or we don't sign this deal today. They actually, the thing was the sinking of the deal and like the stopping of the press conference after the fact. I analyzed it as them blowing it up in reaction to them being angry at him making a media stunt out of it. Not that how dare you demand this as part of the deal.
Trump tolerated like numerous things that Zelensky said that he didn't necessarily agree with, allowing Zelensky to speak, and you could see it in him. Like, he's like, okay, well, I don't agree with that, but all right, let's move on. Next question. Okay, didn't agree with that either. All right, that's fine. Okay, next question. And then he's like, now we need defense assurances. And Trump is like, all right, fuck this shit. Like, you're not changing the deal. We had a deal agreed to, and now you're trying to change it. This is bullshit. You're in my office, and you're manipulating the press that I have given you the opportunity to speak to in my office now to modify the terms of the agreement that we've already agreed to, and you are supposed to sign tonight. That is dodgy, it is backstabbing, and it is bullshit. He should not have done that, and I just can't believe he didn't know better. It's what I'm thinking.
I feel like we watched two totally different press conferences, because I saw it as a totally valid complaint about something that neither the Trump administration or the Biden administration is.
It's a valid complaint. I agree with you.
But it was not part of the demands for the mineral deal. And it was, I mean, all the complaints I saw about the mineral deal from the Ukrainian side, eventually they got hammered out. But can we just say the whole way they do diplomacy with the Ukrainians is ass backwards. I mean, the mineral deal was proposed by Secretary Bessent, and when they give it to them, they demand control over their infrastructure, their ports. They control primary ownership over the board. I mean, these are things that would never be agreed to.
Listen, I think it's different approaches because Zelensky doesn't know how to behave.
And then goes to them and say, you agree to this within the hour. We own you, your only remaining ports. No country was ever going to react like that. Trump doesn't know how to behave.
I'm telling you,
this is projection.
It is not a, I hear a lot of people that say it's like preferential treatment or whatever. It's not, there's no preferential treatment.
Why did the Ukrainians
difference is that Zelensky does, one second. The difference is that Zelensky does not know how to fucking behave, okay? Vladimir Putin would have never agreed to a deal and then came to the White House and manipulated the American press to modify the terms of that agreement. And that is why that would have never happened to Putin, because Putin is a terrible, disgusting human individual who should probably be hung in public, but he's not a fucking idiot.
Dude, you keep complaining about this one thing. Trump behaved every
you
day.
Brought it up.
I didn't bring up I don't even know if I brought up the deal originally. I think you brought up the Oval Office meeting.
No, you brought up something related to it, I think
I brought up something in relation to like, when are we gonna like whatever. I can't remember, because I honestly think the Oval Office meeting is ultimately unimportant. I think when we talk about like Trump's behavior towards Ukraine, this is a general trend of him lying about the war, whether it's about the Kursk encirclement, whether it's about the amount of aid that we have sent over, whether it's about any number of just tiny itty bitty shit that he doesn't know about or doesn't seem to be very informed on. And then he surrounds himself with Steve Witkoff and other people who are even less informed on it. And it has led to him being, for the first 4 months of his administration, for this 24 to 100 day period where he was supposed to bring an end to the war, applying little to no pressure on the Russians. I mean, to the point where we're tariffing the Ukrainians, but we're not tariffing the Russians. We still do $3.1 billion in trade with the Russians every year. The reason that people think that Russia's getting preferential treatment is because that's what it looks like.
And with Russia is not getting preferential treatment. I think that Trump handles Putin differently than he handles Zelensky, because Putin and Zelensky are not the same people. I think that Trump is nice to Zelensky when Zelensky is nice to him. I think that Trump is nice to Putin when Putin is nice to him, or when the occasion demands that he be nice to these people, but the minute they do something he doesn't like, he turns on both of them, regardless of whether it's Putin or Zelensky. And somebody in the chat is saying, like,
my question was where my peace deal was.
One sec, Trump. Yeah, that's what it was. Somebody in the chat is saying, like, oh, well, you know, how are you going to say that Zelensky doesn't know how to behave in public, but Trump does? It's like, well, you know, I think Trump said it best. He doesn't have the cards. Trump does have the cards. Trump can. When Trump behaves a certain way that you don't like, like, unfortunately, he has the fucking cards, right? Zelensky doesn't have the cards. He is coming here asking for aid. He is asking for things, right? Trump has the cards. Zelensky does not have the cards. In every situation Trump is in, he has the cards.
Well, also
Zelensky
Congress
does not
has
have
the cards because Congress is the institution that can get rid of sanctions, and Trump does not have every Republican convinced that sanctions should be removed on the Russians unilaterally without a peace deal.
You're right.
And so it's not as simple as Trump having all the cards. In Ukraine, when it comes to long-range
I don't think Trump
policy,
wants to remove the sanctions without a peace deal.
Export. If you want to talk about bringing up international oil prices, if the Ukrainians decide, you know what, we're going to target Russian export terminals, we're going to say no more exporting Russian international gas to the market. That's something that could, you know, be cards in their deck that I don't think is properly analyzed. All I'm saying is that the Ukrainians are treated as weaker than they are.
Sure, I'll say I agree with you, but I don't think that Zelensky has the cards to come to a press conference and change the terms of a deal. That is how it got brought up. You asked where's the ceasefire agreement, and then we brought up the press conference. It's obviously directly related.
I mean, and the thing is, he agreed to, because the way that Trump put it is, I gotta go over here and I gotta be, you know, a little aggressive with this guy, a little aggressive with that guy. They could both come down, we'll get a deal. This war would have never happened with me. You know, all this like performance around how this was supposed to go. And then the Ukrainians agreed to a unilateral 30-day ceasefire exactly under Trump's terms after being put under the real ringer. Zelensky's called a dictator. I mean, the whole shebang. And then after that happens, go to the Russians, they laugh at it, they violate all of his ceasefires, and we have yet to have a single sanction put in place. And he refuses to call them out in public.
I agree. Listen, I agree with you, and I'm not a like monolith. I don't agree with everything that Trump does. I don't think he should have called Zelensky a dictator, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But I also think that we are facing another problem too, which is that we have one belligerent side that is less likely to agree to a ceasefire. It's like, look at every war Israel's been into, for example. Like, it's like a ceasefire is demand, a ceasefire is proposed, Israel agrees to it immediately, and then all of the other countries have to have the shit kicked out of them before they agree with it. So it's like, unfortunately, Russia has more power, and they are the belligerent side. Whereas, like, with Israel, usually they're the one who is agreeing, and they're not the belligerent side, and they have the power to beat the shit out of the belligerent side. But unfortunately, it's like, at this time, Russia was already like an established world power, and Ukraine wasn't. So it's like a really unique and unfortunate situation. And I agree with you. I want the war to stop. I don't want Ukraine to have to cede any territory.
I have to pressure the Russians.
Ukrainians to die.
He hasn't pressured them.
Sure, I agree with you. I think he should pressure the Russians harder, but I don't think that he's like, you know, in bed with Putin like everybody claims.
I don't think
he likes Putin.
Look, honestly,
no, I know you didn't say that. I know you didn't say that.
I don't think he's in bed with Putin, but I will say I do think he might just personally like the guy. It's a dumb explanation. It might be the simplest explanation, but when he talked, wait,
speculate.
I mean, Steve Witkoff said that they traded paintings and that Putin prayed for him and he expresses his personal love. And look, all of that may be garbage, but until I see the president of the United States treat him with a backbone and don't take his word over the word of our intelligence organizations, then it's going to be hard for me to believe that he has the cojones to say, I'm going to drop this gigantic aid deal for the Ukrainians. I'm going to do this massive sanctions deal on the Russians. And now we're going to bring this war to a rapid close, or we're going to grind the Russian war machine to a halt. That is not something the Russians think that Trump's going to do. And so they continue to act like they behave right now.
Well, so I think that Trump has to be very careful with how he's dealing with Russia, because again, like we're at this point basically in a Cold War with Russia again, and the problem is I honestly don't even necessarily know if the Cold War fucking ended, but at this point we are basically in a Cold War with Russia, and you obviously have to handle this very carefully, especially when you're making public statements about Putin or about Russia or whatever, because you don't want to risk conveying yourself poorly to the Russian populace, right? And unfortunately, Russia has several thousand like really big cards with nuclear warheads on the top of them. So that's another problem, right? Trump has to be more careful. I would imagine that probably a lot of his like backboned conversations with Putin are probably dealt in private settings
where nobody can see it, and nobody can see that he's applying pressure, and we haven't seen the effects of any of it. And
yeah, probably, yeah.
Do you know how disconcerting that is to be like, well, we just gotta hope that the president's doing a good job when he has no record of adding pressure to these guys?
Well, we'll just see. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we're just gonna have to wait and see. I don't think that Trump is like in bed with Russia. As far as like the exchanging paintings or whatever, this seems to be like pretty standard diplomatic process.
Let's
like
wrap this up because I know you have something to do, and I know I see you going to your phone, so I want to make sure you can get out of here. Okay? Do you think he's done a good job?
I'm just watching chat.
Do you think he's done a good job when it comes to dealing with the Russians?
Like I said, Dylan, like Russia, Ukraine is not my specialty. So I don't know. If you say that he's not doing a good enough job, then that's fine. Then I would take your word for it because you know a lot more about this specific conflict than I do, and that's fine. My thing is Israel. So if you think that he's not doing a good enough job being tough on Russia, then fine, I would disagree with you. Or take your opinion as probably better than my opinion because I'm just not an expert on this topic. So like I said, I don't agree with everything Trump does. I don't agree with everything he says. I can point to like several like policy proposals he's made that I just completely disagree with, or policies put in action that I completely disagree with. But yeah, I don't know. Finding a president or voting for a president is a practice of finding somebody who most closely aligns with you. You're never going to find somebody who exactly aligns with you. So.
Yeah,
do you want to talk about Kilmar?
I thought you didn't have much more time. Do you still have time?
I could I can talk for like 10 minutes and then I have to go to a riot.
Okay, don't hurt anybody with a brick, okay?
No. I'm just documenting. Did you see my Twitter coverage from last night?
No, man. I was watching We Were Soldiers, the Mel Gibson movie.
You got to check it out, dude. They lit UW on fire last night. It's nuts.
Okay, I'll check it out. I mean, I don't really know if I mean, the Garcia case is one case. I mean, I just believe that the president should abide by the courts. I just believe that, if you have this massive Supreme Court majority, you don't really have much room to complain. Like you're already like most of these people are Trump appointed judges that are making these decisions anyway. And so it just, to me, it just seems like a sore loser, sore losing. And you could have deported this guy to any other country if you really, really wanted to go through with it. But he just cares so little about the process, or really, when it comes down to the rule of law, that he just doesn't know how to do it. And so he ends up deporting a bunch of people. Like, they deported a bunch of women to a men's prison. It's just, they're going in overdrive.
I think it was. I think that the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case was an administrative error, but like as far as I'm concerned, like I don't feel bad for the guy at all. I do agree with you that the president should abide by the courts, and I think that this was a blunder for sure from the Trump administration. But I have no sympathy for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who belongs to a gang whose motto is kill, steal, rape, control. As far as I'm concerned, he should be like dead in the ditch somewhere.
Okay, so we have yet to see this man convicted in the court of law, but he should be dead in the ditch, even though because of the
evidence. The evidence is overwhelming.
When we say evidence is overwhelming, as far as I know, the strongest piece of evidence is the statements of two judges who say they believe that he's in a gang, but we haven't seen the evidence of it, and it hasn't been proved in a court of law.
Huge body of evidence. So the fact that he was arrested alongside other MS-13 gang members, he was identified by an undercover agent as an MS-13 gang member. You have the two judges. You have his wife's ex-husband, the father of their alleged children. They call him a Maryland dad. He's not a father. He's a stepfather.
Wait, I thought two of them were stepkids, and one of them is his kid.
It's like maybe one of them is his kid, whatever. But the father of those children that he lived with filed a complaint in 2018 before he was ever arrested as an MS-13 gang member, before this was ever a popular story, with no motive whatsoever outside of, oh, he's the ex-husband or whatever, so he wanted to identify him as a gang member. But why would he make such a specific allegation against this guy? He filed a complaint in court saying that he feared for his children's life because his ex-wife was living with a gang member. That you got the tattoos, you've got the fact that his wife covers up his knuckles in all of the photos between the two of them. The evidence is overwhelming. He's a fucking gang. He's an MS-13 gang member, and he doesn't belong in this country, and he should be dead in a ditch. Their motto is kill, steal, rape, control.
Cam, I know you're trying to be dramatic.
Is too nice.
I know you're trying to be dramatic. I stream on Twitch. Okay, so
Oh, sorry. Am I TOSing?
I think
Sorry.
we'll get away with it for dictators, but for like people in high-profile immigration cases that they haven't been proven that they're MS-13 100%, I think you should be a little bit more careful. Okay.
Okay. I'll be more careful.
okay.
Sorry, I forgot Twitch.
Yeah, we're on Twitch, and
I forget there's people who still stream on Twitch.
Look, I'm just gonna throw out there this because I heard some alternative reports about the undercover officer and people trying to discredit him as an unreliable source. The two judges, of course, they haven't presented that evidence in a court of law, so I would have to take those private words, those judges with no evidence presented, that he was in there. Wait, let me finish. I have to take into account the tattoos on his knuckles, which we know that there was a point system on how they judge if somebody is an MS-13 and how they were deporting people. And one of them was the existence of tattoos. It didn't say MS-13 tattoos. It said the existence of tattoos. And so we do know that people were incorrectly deported here. We do know not everybody there that was deported had a criminal record, including Mr. Garcia, but also including others as well, like a gay Venezuelan hairdresser that certainly was probably top ISIS guy that we just, we never knew about it. And so from my perspective, like, I'm not going to tell you this guy's a saint, right? I know that he was working as a sheet metal worker in the Maryland area, and his union representative has spoken up for him as somebody who was working there. Maybe he was a scumbag, and now he's less of a scumbag. Maybe he's always been a scumbag. I don't know.
Always and still is.
And the thing is, like, I was raised by somebody who was basically a criminal in his youth and became a reformed criminal, and so maybe my...
I hope you weren't a member of MS-13. The motto being...
Oh, not for long. Not for long, I swear. But the thing is,
Let's see those knuckles.
My point is, what matters at the end of the day is because of all these discrepancies, is because you're ready to say, kill the guy, right? My position is we should.
I'm not saying kill the guy. I'm saying.
No, but the thing is, we're talking about him in such a way.
I wouldn't be sad.
And we're dehumanizing him in such a way that if he disappeared in that prison system, people wouldn't care. Or some people would say that
you're getting me really close to saying something against TOS because, like, dehumanizing him, absolutely, for sure.
My point is, if this is the type of way a human being is going to be treated, we got to make sure we got our facts right. It should be treated by a court of our peers, jury. All of this should happen. And President Trump, when asked if he should uphold the Constitution, he says, I don't know. When asked about these people get a fair case,
it is not a criminal violation. It is not a criminal violation to belong to a gang, right? But it is a criminal violation to improperly enter this country, which we already know that he did. He was under a deportation order, as you acknowledge. He just shouldn't have been deported to El Salvador. It was an administrative error, and I agree with you that it was a blunder from the Trump administration, and it shouldn't have happened, right? But he was an MS-13 gang member. The father of his stepchildren filed a court complaint in 2018 before he was ever arrested, saying that he was a gang member. He was an MS-13 gang member. Their motto is kill, steal, rape, control. And I believe that makes you less than human if you think that you need to kill and rape people. Yes, I think that makes you less than human. Yes, look it up. Kill, steal, rape, control.
You're giving him a lot of
the DOJ, according to the DOJ.
Shouting out their motto every time. You're acting like a football ultra for these guys.
No, I'm just saying it's disgusting. Like, it's disgusting, and it's if you believe that you need to gain control by killing and raping, like, you are less than human. I don't feel bad for you because you have to. I think CCOT is too nice for you. I don't think that you belong on this earth. I'm trying to find terms that are TOS, but I mean, this is gonna be like my bottom line, man. I don't think that.
At the end of the day, here's the thing, Cam. Right. I am not going to declare this guy as an MS-13 gang member because I don't trust the Trump administration as far as I could throw him. And I'm going to wait until I have solid enough evidence that isn't like, well, these two judges
look into the filing.
Well, his ex-husband said.
Why was he under withholding removal? Why was he? Dylan, why was he under withholding removal?
To go to El Salvador.
Why was he seeking? Why was he seeking to not be sent to El Salvador?
Do I answer
because
now,
he was afraid that rival gangs would kill him in El Salvador.
I was gonna answer, but then you yelled over. Why did you ask me 3 times, and then I go to answer and you yell over me?
Maybe there's a delay. I didn't. It didn't look like you're sorry. You're like over here.
I was trying to. Each time I leaned in, you just said, "Why do you do?" Da 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 da. Okay.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Dylan.
Okay. Look, here's the thing. This guy could be Hitler. Okay, and ultimately. This might be like the unpopular position. That should not matter when it comes to what the court says, and the Trump administration ignores the courts. And he says we don't ignore the courts.
I don't think. I think it was an administrative error. I don't think they ignored the courts.
No, I don't believe that because they were informed.
That's
by
fine.
The
You
courts
cannot. You have a right to not believe that.
Hours beforehand. And it's not like Trump listened to the courts when it came to January 6th. The first time around, it's not like he's ever been somebody to listen to the courts. Have you?
Wait. How did he not listen? Okay, we're not going to get into J6.
When the courts overturned it, when the courts throw it out, he said, "I don't care," and he continued to try to pursue it. He continued to pursue it outside of all.
You're talking about that. Okay. We're not going to get into that because that's going to be another hour that'll be here. Somebody said in the chat that he didn't get due process. Not true. Again, as Dylan and I have established, he was under a deportation order withholding removal to El Salvador. An administrative error resulted in him being sent to the wrong country, but he was given due process. He had several court trials, and he was under a deportation order.
Like I am somebody who's like, I guess I believe in like the shining city on the hill because I'm a schmuck, right? The idea that immigrants should be able to come here and make like a future for themselves. And because, I guess Yankee Doodle Dandy propaganda has borne on me. I think it's a beautiful thing, actually.
Very impractical, though. It would be beautiful, but very impractical.
So, I'm reading about all these people that are getting deported, and I was told that we're going to go after the rapists and the murderers, and this was like the main focus of what Trump talks about all the time is rapists and murderers. It takes actually not a lot of time spending on, well, we're going to deport all of the, carpenters. We're going to deport all of the ice cream men. We're going to deport, because that's not as popular when you think, oh, that guy's been here for 20 years as an ice cream man. We should probably figure out a way. A lot of people feel that way. And I'm watching people from my own community. I know like a good friend of mine's husband was recently deported from Mexico. And this has to do with like marijuana charges from 12 years ago. These have to do with
fine. I think that if your first action entering this country was blatantly disrespecting and disregarding the laws of this country, you do not belong here. Trump has said routinely that he's going to target the worst of the worst, the rapists, the murderers, the child predators, etc., but that you are not safe if you illegally enter this country. 8 U.S. Code 1325, you cannot improperly enter this country. 8 U.S. Code 1324, you cannot harbor an illegal immigrant. If you do not have permission from an immigration official to cross the U.S. border, you cannot cross the U.S. border unless it is to access a port of entry. So you fly into the country and then you go talk to customs. Or you cross 2 feet across the border at a port of entry and you talk to a customs agent at the border. That is what you have to do to enter this country. You need permission to enter the interior of this country from an immigration official.
Why would it be so difficult to keep the people here that contribute to the country and then stiffen rules and harden the border now?
You do not have a right to enter this country if your first action entering this country was blatantly disregarding and disrespecting the laws of this country and undermining everyone else who is trying to legally enter this country.
So you
do not belong here.
Is that what this is about?
This is about being a hard. Yeah, absolutely. It's about being a hard ass.
Okay.
If your first action was blatantly disrespecting, disregarding the laws of this country and undermining everyone else who is trying to enter this country legally, you can go fuck yourself. Goodbye.
Okay. So I know right now there's a huge housing crisis in the country, and I want to build a bunch of houses really quick. This is something Trump said, build, baby, build. So I would assume this is somebody who probably wants more building, more houses built. And right now, the second biggest employer of undocumented people outside of the, farm fields where they're working and gathering carrots and different things for dinner tables, it has to do with the construction industry.
Yeah, this is great. So I don't care.
Well,
I don't care. There'll be a labor loss. Yeah, sure. I don't care. But also there was a huge labor loss when we outlawed slavery, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have outlawed slavery. As far as I don't understand people who think this shit is compassionate. Damn. One second, Dylan. No. Let me hit this point.
Don't be such a bastard about it.
I don't think you. No. It's not fucking dramatic.
Slavery,
I've been to the border and I've talked to illegal immigrants. You guys do not fucking understand how terrible it is for illegal immigrants. It's not compassionate. Do you know what is required to enter this country illegally?
Yes,
what is required to enter this country illegally?
That's why I don't, because they went through all that stuff to get here.
No. What is required? No. It's not about the effort. What is required to enter this country illegally?
Well, it depends. If you're coming from Honduras, you'd probably have to come a tremendous long way among many smuggling routes.
And then what happens once you get to the U.S.-Mexico border?
Why do you ask me?
No, because I don't care about what happens between Central America or South America and the United States. What happens when you get to the Mexico border? What is required to get across that border into the United States undetected? What is required? I've been to the border. I've interviewed law enforcement. I've interviewed illegal immigrants. What is required?
Okay, are you done yet? Jesus fuck.
Yes, okay. yes. What is required?
If it depends. If during the era of the CB1 app, I know a few people who applied through that process. And he's gone. And he's gone. I was gonna say it depends, because before you had to apply in the CB1 app in order to like apply for like asylum, and then that was the legal way to do it, and then that's when you cross and you like turned yourself over to Customs and Border Patrol officials. But that was scratched, and that's not allowed anymore. And a lot of the people who are in the process of doing it the legal way is also getting deported because they did it through the CB1 app. So it's not just about entering the country illegally. Even the people who entered it legally, putting aside any of the economic consequences. But the dude left. I don't know why I'm even answering this. He can't stay much longer. So, hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I answered. You either have to apply for asylum through something like the CB1 app, which was the option before the Trump administration disabled it, or you had to turn yourself over to Customs Border Patrol officials. So you had to do it either way. But you can also enter it illegally. A lot of people did it illegally. I'm not disputing that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't mean like what is the legal requirement. I mean like what is required
but by the way,
to
Trump is
illegally
also
enter the country.
deporting the people who applied for the CB1 app. So even if you do it legally,
this is no. This is not where I'm going with this. I understand why you think this is where I'm going. This is not where I'm going with this. I can't stay much longer after this, but
okay.
Almost every illegal immigrant who enters this country illegally with the purpose of evading detection has to work with the cartel to get into this country. And what almost always happens is the person, usually poor, they want to come to the United States, says, okay, I need somebody, because think about it, all right? You have a huge desert between the Mexico border and where they need to go. They don't want to settle in Texas because they're going to be arrested, right? They don't want to settle in Arizona because they're going to be arrested. Where they're entering, there is generally some treacherous biome that they have to traverse that is usually extremely hot and kills a lot of people. I've seen the bodies of people who just cross the border and die in a field because it's so hot, right? So you're almost always going to need a coyote who's going to get you through that treacherous biome safely without you dying of exposure, dehydration, or heat stroke. You're also going to need somebody who is going to know where law enforcement is posted, knows their routes, and knows how to evade law enforcement. So not only do you have this treacherous desert or other terrible climate you have to traverse, you also have law enforcement really everywhere, desert, and you have to get across.
It's just the desert, really.
What's that?
It's just the desert.
What's that? And they die. The people die in the desert all the time.
Well, no, I didn't say it's just the desert. I mean, you said some side of terrible terrain. It's only the desert. I don't know. There's like a giant.
Pretty much only the desert.
Swamp biome that somebody has to get
across. Fine. I don't know. That's a huge point, but anyway, like, so you're gonna need a coyote almost always.
I was just trying to imagine
illegally.
there was something else that I didn't know of.
No, I don't think so. But generally, so like what'll happen is they'll have somebody help them get across the desert, and then at some point they're gonna have a pickup point, which costs more money. First, you have to pay the person to smuggle you across the border, get you past law enforcement, and then they hire an American citizen, usually some poor college kid or high school kid, who will drive down to meet you wherever you are once you've traversed this terrible place, and they will drive you up to San Antonio or some other northern city, whether it's inside of Texas, outside of Texas, inside of Arizona, wherever that is weaker on enforcing immigration crimes. They smuggle you into the country. It costs a lot of money. These people are usually poor, so the cartel says, all right, we understand that you don't have the money right now, but we'll do it anyway. But you're going to owe us. So they come into the United States. I just really, I guess it's not released yet. I'm releasing a documentary on this soon that I filmed at the U.S. border. They get in, and now they owe the cartel. So when they're working these like low-end jobs, whatever it is, these low-skilled jobs, most of their paycheck is going to the cartel, and they're effectively slaves of the cartel. And if they don't pay the cartel will either kill them or kill their family in whatever country they came from. And this happens all the time. I spoke to law enforcement at the border. I interviewed them. I interviewed the former mayor of Del Rio, Texas. It's like terrible. It's not compassionate for the illegal immigrants at all. It's terrible. I guess the northern border is a different story, but in terms of the Mexico border, it is not compassionate for the illegal immigrant. It puts them in terrible situations, and it doesn't create good outcomes for them.
Okay, but the thing is, number one,
and they are effectively slaves.
Okay, let's do two. So number one, the majority of people here are on visa overstays, and even if that statistic is old, and now it's like 48% or 47%. That means that if you're saying it's like slavery, that immediately you're discounting like 50% of the people right off the bat. They can't be. They're not in your slave system, right? Then there's people who pay.
I mean, they are though, because they're working regardless of whether or not they're paying the cartel. they're still working for basically nothing.
Okay, but let's not
in whatever
let's
job
not,
they are, because
okay, so slavery.
you're not going to hire an illegal immigrant unless you can get them cheap.
Slavery is just poor poverty now. Slavery is anything that.
Well, you're paying them absolute
negative.
poverty wages. Yeah.
Well, let's not call it
so
slavery.
people who hire illegal immigrants are going to pay absolute poverty wages.
Okay.
Some slaves got paid, you know,
Bernie
like pennies. Right?
Bernie Sanders. Okay, I got it. Like the capitalists are like, look, low wages don't immediately equal slavery.
No. I'm not saying the capitalists. Slavery is bad, and every capitalist believes that slavery is bad. And we should work to abolish it as much as possible.
Just equal slavery.
Basically nothing. Slaves sometimes got wages.
You agree in a minimum wage then? You agree that we should not be able to pay somebody beneath a certain amount of living wage that everyone deserves?
No. You shouldn't be allowed to pay people below. If you have a standard minimum wage, Dylan, if you have a standard minimum wage that has jacked all of the prices up, you shouldn't be allowed to pay people below that wage, right?
I understand.
No, I don't want everybody to be slaves.
Don't call it slavery.
The minimum wage has jacked up the price of everything artificially. So if you have a minimum wage institutionalized and you're paying people 200% less than that minimum wage, or 1,000% less than that minimum wage, they are effectively slaves. They are working for almost nothing.
Call it
illegally.
You call it wage theft or whatever you want. You can call it, if you want to call it slavery and you want to be dramatic, you can call it slavery if you want to.
They're slaves.
It's abused. I think that's
and by the way, they're used as slaves too, politically. They're used exactly how slaves were used politically. The Three-Fifths Compromise. They're counted in the census.
Okay.
That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden counted them in the census for the same reason that Southern slave owners wanted to count slaves in the census. They can't vote. They can't possess any political power, but you count them in the census. That determines electoral voting power, congressional funding, federal funding and congressional seats, right? So they can't vote, they can't do anything. But now that you have more of them in your place, now you get more congressional seats, federal funding, and electoral voting power. It's the same thing the Southern slave owners did with the Three-Fifths Compromise. And that's what Joe Biden did.
I call him Plantation Joe. That's what I call him.
That's okay. I'm with you.
I live in a district that has people who are undocumented. The reason that they count that is because they need resources for those people, because they also access public services. Not a lot of public services, because it depends on whether or not you can get a
right. The congressional seats and the electoral voting power is just a nice benefit.
Well, it's something that also they get, yes, but you don't believe that, if
and spoiler alert, you shouldn't get increased federal funding for violating federal law. Right, 8 U.S. Code 1324, harboring an illegal alien.
Having an undocumented
they should be in a federal facility.
Having an undocumented person in your district isn't violating federal law.
Providing services to them is 8 U.S. Code 1324. You cannot harbor or provide aid to a person who's illegally entered this country.
When you say provide aid,
it is absolutely a violation of federal code. Providing aid. You just said they're using their systems, their welfare systems.
Provide aid specifically refers to providing aid away from federal capture.
No, it's providing aid in general. Harboring them would be so. If I harbor you, what am I doing? I'm letting you into my house and I'm letting you eat my food.
See, they're saying harbor because it's trying to hide.
Harboring and providing aid. Harboring and providing aid. So you don't think that feeding them food and giving them access to your welfare system is harboring and providing aid? I think it is.
Okay, so if somebody
and you shouldn't be allowed to do this. So declaring a sanctuary city, you don't get extra federal funding for that.
What do you mean extra federal funding for declaring a federal sanctuary?
You just said they need extra. You just said they need extra federal funding because they're using their systems.
Federal funding would only come if the people were to come and place that increased burden on the system.
No, not true. You get federal funding based on the census. So if you have more people included in the census, you get more federal funding. You also get more congressional seats and electoral voting power.
Then you have more people to provide for.
You shouldn't be providing for illegal immigrants.
But then
they should be in a detainment facility.
So you're trying to get the extra funding to provide for the people who are going to be an extra burden on the funding.
You should be reporting them to the federal government, and they should be in a detainment facility under the purview of the federal government. If you did that, you wouldn't have the extra burden on the system. The federal government would have the extra burden, and they would allocate funds as necessary.
Thank God for states' rights.
You don't have state rights. You cannot violate federal law as a state. States cannot violate federal. You have states' rights. States can act outside of federal law, right? They can't violate federal law. They can do what they want, not in violation of federal law.
So when Biden does the AR-15 ban, you're gonna ask all the state people to throw in their AR-15s in the big basket.
Well, it's just gonna be like constitutional law, right? So you can't act outside the supreme law of the land, and you're not going to be able to act outside of federal code. A AR-15 ban wouldn't be federal code. It would be like a bill, like the
What do you
ban
think?
AR-15s Act.
Why are we not talking about the interesting things? I want to ask you a question. When are we going to?
Well, I gotta go soon.
Okay, last question then. What do you think
Okay,
about
fine.
what should happen to the homegrowns? Do you think the homegrown should go to El Salvador like Trump says?
No, of course I don't think that American citizens should be deported abroad. I don't agree with that. I do, however, think that just soil legal doctrine in terms of like giving birthright citizenship should be revoked. It was never the intention. If you look at the author of the 14th Amendment, he specifically said in his explanation before Congress after he wrote the 14th Amendment that this would not apply to aliens. This was the case for the Civil Rights Act of 1887 or 4, I forget, 1880 something, that also specifically said that people born in American soil are American citizens, except for the people who are born of aliens or diplomats. So this was never the intention of the 14th Amendment, and it should have never been interpreted that way. It was actually the Arkwong Kim Supreme Court case years after the man who wrote the 14th Amendment died that they decided that, suddenly they forgot that he said that it didn't include illegal aliens, and they ruled it completely against it. The outside of the jurisdiction, they just apparently it was just another case of judicial bullshit activism, just like Roe v. Wade. No, I don't think it was oopsie doopsie at all. I think it was judicial activism, just like Roe v. Wade in 1973.
Got you. Okay. Well, I still live in when I go home, I still live in a blue state where abortion's legal. Thank the Lord. We don't have to like get the coat hangers out.
Nobody's doing oh my God, this is another myth, dude. Like nobody's doing coat hanger abortion, bro.
I feel, more traditional tall thing of stairs is more of a traditional.
Do you know why it's called back up? But this is the last thing before I go. Do you know why it's called back alley abortions? It's called back alley abortions because they enter the clinic through the back alley. Have almost always been performed by clinicians from the very beginning. This has been the case like since pre-World War II.
Are they more or less dangerous than normal abortions performed by?
If both are performed by a doctor in a clinic, I would say they're the same. I would say that they're the same if they're both performed by a clinician in a clinic, which has been the case since pre-World War II.
So you would say that banning abortion and not banning abortion, the level of fatality from abortion services being provided, that safety.
Well, I don't know. Like if morons are letting Darwin do his thing and they're shoving coat hangers up their vaginas, I don't necessarily in the action of. So like if I want to kill my child and I shove a coat hanger up my vagina and I die, I don't necessarily feel bad.
Okay,
right?
well now that we got that out of your system, what I meant was, when they don't have the oversight anymore and we don't have boards going to these clinicians and we have people in the back alley saying, sure, I'm a doctor, I'll do it. I mean, again,
it's not people in the back alley. You don't understand. The term back alley abortion comes from women entering the back door of the clinic through the back alley.
Through the back alley. So where do you talk to the doctor?
What do you mean? Where do you get let in through the door and you talk to the doctor in the clinic?
Whatever. Okay. My point
through the back door of the building.
It's a turn of phrase. I wasn't saying that they're going to have the abortion literally in the back alley.
But I think a lot of people think that. I think a lot of people think they're like there's like hundreds of thousands of women in back alleys next to a dumpster like shoving a coat hanger up their vagina. It's not true.
I do not.
It's never been true.
I do not believe.
I think there's a delay.
I think there might be. I believe that there is a higher risk for infection. There's a higher risk for the life of the mother and, of course, the life of anybody who is going to be put under less regulatory oversight from a government who's not going to be in the room to make sure that the people who are providing these services are doing it in clean environments, are medical professionals who are doing it with the right amount of resources, that they have another clinician on standby to make sure if anything goes wrong, they can provide services, or the fact that if something does go wrong, who do they go to? Do they go to a bunch of other clinicians that they're now going to get involved in the crime? The point is, when we criminalize,
we're just going to be true. We're just going to disagree, Dylan, because I'm just going to think there should be no regulation about how exactly you should be allowed to kill children. So we're just going to disagree on this.
I think water slide.
And we should have an abortion. We should have an abortion debate sometime.
My method is water slide.
Water slide. Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. I'm kind of preferential to your stair one that you mentioned earlier, but.
No. Look, I just, these things are going to happen. These things are always going to happen. And so the best thing to do is to try to reduce harm. And I mean, we're going to probably dispute where human life's value comes from. I think it comes through the experiences of the individual, not just
I don't care about
from
value.
two cells coming like boop together.
I don't really think like humans. Oh God, this is just another thing we're okay. Last thing, and then I'm out. I don't really. My position doesn't hinge on like whether humans have value or not. I don't necessarily care if humans have intrinsic value. It matter. My position is more rooted in like at what point human beings should be assigned life, or sorry, not life, rights. And I think that all humans, genetically distinct human individuals, ought to have the right not to be unjustly aggressed upon to protect self-interest and the interests of others and flourish as a species. But that's a conversation for another day. Maybe we can organize an abortion debate.
So abortion's
we can
not
hash
really
it
my
out.
big thing, but I'm sure I can explain. I say having abortions like mowing your lawn is what I say.
Jesus Christ. Okay. All right. Well, that's a good note to leave on.
Let's
Thanks for
wrap
having
up
me,
on that.
Dylan.
Having a one.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It's always a pleasure.
I
Dylan Burns, my favorite
look,
liberal streamer.
I disagree with you on so much, but I mean, you spar back and forth, and I enjoy it. But the delay was killing me this time. The delay made me want to strangle you a few times.
I know. I swear, I wasn't trying to. There was some times where I was trying to interrupt you. Like, for the most part, I think it was the delay.
Okay, man. You have a good one and take care of yourself. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You too.
Okay. Bye bye.
See ya.
Man, I think that could be a two-parter. Honestly, that went longer. It was only supposed to go an hour to an hour and a half. It went over 2 hours, as it tends to.